Part 45. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 451. Being beaten back by Wusong's smooth attack and defense, Wesker was full of doubts, which overwhelmed other emotions. If the person in front of him was his mortal enemy, he could understand why he was so strong. But the enemy's background was very ordinary, and he had no military experience. He was just an ordinary businessman from a mysterious country. Why? The depression in his heart turned into a roar. Wesker stepped back to gain distance and stand firm. He drew a circle from bottom to top in front of him to block Wusong's attack. Luo Guang was busy controlling Wusong at this time. He had no mood and time to answer the other party's questions and chased after him. Ha! Wesker stabbed again. Wusong took the initiative to meet him with Tai Chi hand, entangled his hands and crashed into Wesker's arms. While tripping, he used the power of the other party's punch to throw over his shoulder, and then followed with a hand-breaking move. Victor, who was watching the battle not far away, looked eager to try. But he did not disobey the order, but excitedly explained the current situation to his team members using the radio. Wusong and Wesker's battle was dazzling, and only Hank and Victor, who had been enhanced by the Shinra virus, could barely keep up with the speed of the two men's battle. Unlike Victor, Hank was already past that age of passion. He had seen Wesker's photo, so he recognized the identity of the enemy. Now he finally understood what the boss had said before. Facing such a fast enemy, the role of firearms must have declined, so Hank could understand why Wusong threw away the Desert Eagle instead of changing bullets and continuing to attack. Hank's eyes flickered, and suddenly said, "Lone Wolf and Chen brothers, go and move the heavy weapons in the warehouse, we need some heavy firepower." After that, he also assigned tasks to other teams. The evolved or mutated Death God could see the bullet head that fell from Wesker before, and knew that the lethality of ordinary firearms was also limited. He now deeply understood the superior firepower theory mentioned by the boss. Chen Zichen confirmed, is it necessary? Captain, didn't you just say that the boss has the upper hand now? Be prepared. Go. If the boss can really deal with the other party, it will definitely not take so long, and how can an enemy that needs to be dealt with by artillery be killed so easily by fists and feet? The fight between the two continued. Wusong broke Wesker's hand and was about to continue to beat the drowning dog, but the opponent ignored the injury on his hand and got up with a new long twist. The leg with wind pressure kicked Wusong, who was about to lean over to attack. Using his head to exchange for injuries would definitely be a disadvantage, so he just let go and retreated. Normally, Wusong is just a clone that can be remade at any time, and it is profitable to exchange his life with the other party. The problem now is that the clone is fighting in front of the GIMZ public, so he has to find a reasonable excuse. It can't be that all the people are gone, and Wusong suddenly jumps out from the side to give everyone a surprise, right? That was called a shock, so Luo Guang only regarded this as the last resort. Wesker stood up forcefully, and his right arm turned a circle. A knot appeared at the junction of his shoulders, and he could not use his right arm for the time being. Luo Guang would not miss this opportunity, and controlled his clone to attack again. Wesker felt that the opponent's pulling and pushing technique was very similar to someone else. He was also thrown like this in the past. But now is not the time to think about these things. He took the initiative to meet it. His right arm has recovered as before, and the recovery ability is much faster than before. The Shinwei parasite in the body is restless, and the hormones produced by Wesker's life and death struggle make the newborn excited. The muscles on his body bulged and looked stronger. At the same time, Wesker also adjusted his mentality and attacked again with a martial arts posture, trying to intercept Wusong's attack, and then with flexible body movements, regain the advantage at the beginning. Luo Guang also knows about Jeet Kune Do, and naturally understands the concept of this martial art. So when he saw the opponent's posture, he understood and controlled the clone to switch from offense to defense, trying to prevent the enemy from playing the role of interception. In fact, if the original body came here, he might not adopt this strategy. Because Jeet Kune Do is a martial art that requires the user's reaction speed and other physical qualities to intercept the enemy in the process of the enemy's attack. Or take the initiative and use the speed advantage to hit the enemy with a fast and powerful attack before the enemy attacks, thereby gaining an advantage. So the original body can use the enhanced ability to make itself faster than the opponent, so that Wesker's interception cannot be completed. As for the current Wusong clone, the choice to switch from offense to defense is also for the same reason, so that the enemy's interception advantage no longer exists, and at the same time, blocking and unloading can also eliminate the opponent's strength advantage after the muscle enhancement. Wesker felt more and more uncomfortable as he fought, and his body was constantly hit by Wusong's defensive counterattack, consuming his energy. The fight between the two had passed for 5 minutes, and he felt that he couldn't go on like this, and he had to make a change. Although none of the GIMZ members appeared except Wusong, the loud sound of the other party's gunfire could only indicate one thing, that is, Wusong asked others not to interfere with the fight between the two. So he either had to quickly deal with Wusong and continue the mission, or evacuate immediately and fail the mission. Wesker naturally chose the former. He seized the opportunity to perform a change of direction kick and then accelerated the sweep kick to force Wusong back, and his muscles swelled again. This is his strengthening skill, which strengthens the body by stimulating the Shinra parasite, allowing him to rise to a higher level in all aspects. Luo Guang also saw the change in the opponent, and his clone raised 3 fingers to show Samu's. This is a countdown signal, and it is the start signal of the backup plan written on the note he left for Samu's. Faced with the sudden strength of the enemy, Luo Guang could only change his plan immediately and take the worst strategy to exchange his life with the opponent. Before, he thought he could hold Wesker back and let the opponent retreat, but now it seems that it is impossible to avoid sacrifice. Wesker rushed up again, and Luo Guang tried his best to block, but this time he could not change the direction of the opponent's attack. He was hit hard in the chest and was directly knocked out. With his heart broken, the Shinra virus was quickly repaired. Wusong turned over and landed, and a touch of bright red could not help but flow from the corner of his mouth. Sure enough, as long as there is strong power, then there is no need for any skills, Wesker laughed, as if he was sure of victory. In fact, he was secretly on guard to prevent Wusong from also exploding, and deliberately said this to confuse the enemy. Now for Wesker, even if he can't find Jack, it's worth the trip. He is very interested in Wusong's body, and it is also a good choice to capture him and slice him for research. Moreover, Wusong and Luo Guang have the same origin, and perhaps they can also solve the mystery of cultivating immortals that their mortal enemy said. After finalizing the next plan, Wesker continued to attack, preparing to cut off all Wusong's hands and feet, and then burn the wounds and take the hemostatic bandages back. He turned his fist into a knife and swung it at his enemy. Wusong retreated to avoid it, stretched his arms behind his back, and extended 2 fingers. Samus quickly picked up the walkie-talkie and asked Hank, "Have you prepared the weapons over there?" Hank replied, "It's been prepared for a long time." He received the boss's telepathic message early in the morning, so he asked his team to prepare various heavy weapons. The mortar has been placed at the designated location on the rooftop, ready for precise strikes at any time. There is no need to test the gun. Various markers are spliced on the floor of the square in front of the office building. As long as the parameters of the mortar are adjusted according to the manual, the enemy can be accurately hit. In addition to the mortar, 2 heavy machine guns are also ready. They are in the hands of Hank and Victor, ready to cover their boss at any time. As for the members of the other elite teams, all of them hold a light machine gun with a 250 round belt, ready to attack the enemy who may approach at any time. Samus has already told everyone that the enemy in front of them does not need to be accurately shot. It is only necessary to block the enemy and the surrounding space with bullets. If everyone chooses to accurately shoot the enemy, it will allow the opponent to easily dodge the bullet. Although Wesker did not know what Hank and others were planning, the Shinwei parasite in his body felt the threat to his life, which made him feel creepy and his back cold. Wusong seized the moment when the enemy was distracted and swung the hand that was originally signaling behind him. With a flash of cold light, the dagger cut into Wesker's forearm, but was stopped by the opponent's hard bones and could not be cut in half. After being attacked by Wusong, Wesker chose to quickly resolve the battle by exchanging injuries. He punched Wusong on the head, making his face concave. However, as mentioned before, the brain of Wusong's clone was just a decoration, so he did not fall down. At the same time, he raised his hand and raised his middle finger. Fire! Samus and Hank's voices sounded at the same time. The Chen brothers, who were operating the mortar, could not see the situation of the two fighting because of the angle problem, so they thought that the boss had left the safe range. The sound of artillery sounded one after another, and Wesker gave up chasing Wusong, who did not fall down, and wanted to escape from the dangerous area. His body did not move, and he turned his head to look. Wusong, whose face had recovered, showed him a creepy smile. Wusong hugged Wesker in turn and blocked the opponent's actions with the lock technique. Let go. Do you want to die with me? Wesker exerted force suddenly, and the moment he broke free, he was locked again by Wusong in another posture. The next curse was still in his mouth when the shells fell and enveloped the two. At the same time, Luo Guang also gave the same order to Hank and Victor. Shoot! Luo Guang had thought of this long ago and had adjusted the position of the clone. The clone was facing away from the office building, which meant that Wesker was on the side close to the dormitory building, so he could use Wesker to block the bullet. The two believed in their boss. In their cognition, no one could defeat the boss, so they pulled the trigger without hesitation. The situation took a sharp turn, as if a piece of black iron was pressing on Samus's heart, making her breathless. She originally thought that Wusong would dodge immediately after the order to fire, but she didn't expect that the other party would hug the enemy and die together. The sound of the heavy machine gun sounded, shooting into the smoke and dust raised by the explosion. Unlike Hank and the others, Samus quickly ordered, "Hank! What are you doing?" This is what the boss asked. Hank's voice came into Samus' ears along with the roar of the heavy machine gun. Victor then said, "The enemy in front of us is not an ordinary human. The boss told me before that if I encounter this person, I should just run away and then use firepower to solve the problem." The mortar fired a total of 10 rounds, and the heavy machine gun also ran out of bullets. Wesker was seriously injured and lay on the ground. The 12.7mm bullets fired from the heavy machine gun are more powerful than other light weapons and can easily tear his body apart. If he had not managed to break free from Wusong and change his position at the critical moment, he would have been killed long ago. Hank and Victor replaced the heavy machine gun with new ammunition belts while watching the situation in the square. When the dust settled, the two looked solemn because neither of them could see their boss. Samus's face was mixed with surprise and confusion, wondering if his boss was killed by his own people. Suddenly, Wesker, who was seriously injured and fell to the ground, changed his body. His back with several large holes bulged, and then 3 pairs of spider-like arthropods appeared, supporting his entire body off the ground. Hank and Victor reacted almost in the same way and immediately aimed and shot. Wesker was very agile and ran straight to the dormitory building, but was repelled by the light machine gun. He turned to the office building, wanting to eat people to replenish energy, but was repelled again by the dense firepower of Tanya's team and the miscellaneous team who arrived at the office building from the underground passage. Helpless, the Shinwei parasite could only control Wesker's body to leave here first. After confirming that Wesker had left, the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. In the end, the enemy's counterattack was actually a huge threat. As long as their volley firepower was interrupted, the enemy could immediately rush into the dormitory building. Samus began to direct the post-war work and sent Tanya to check the battle scene. Then, she called Caddy and said, "The battle is over, but you have to wait a little longer for safety." Although the strong enemy was repelled, Samus did not have the slightest happiness in his words, which made the thoughtful Caddy have a bad idea in his heart. Under normal circumstances, Wusong would leave the aftermath to Samus, and he would tell himself that the mother and son were safe. Caddy's voice was a little uneasy, and said, "Okay, where is Wusong?" Instead of calling the boss, he called Wusong's name. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. Sam's, Caddy held the phone tightly, and Jack's figure in front of her seemed to blur. Ahem. Sam's cleared her throat and said, "Sorry, I was just arranging Tanya's task." She continued, "The situation is not clear for the time being, wait until I confirm the situation first." Caddy's voice trembled slightly, and said, "I know, then I won't bother you." Sam's hung up the phone and sighed deeply. Judging from the situation in the square, Wusong is in danger. She is still very puzzled by her boss's behavior, and can only pray that he is ready for his funeral. She lives quite comfortably here at GIMZ, but she doesn't want this place to fall apart. As for Caddy, she can see that Caddy has developed a different feeling for Wusong unconsciously, that is, her boss is like a piece of wood and doesn't think about that aspect. However, considering that her boss said that he was taking care of his wife for the sake of life and death, the other party's response makes sense. So, she didn't tell Caddy the specific situation, but just used some hints. This is to prepare Caddy to accept the sad fact. Mom. Jack looked at Caddy, who was sitting on the bed in a panic, and called out. He also noticed something was wrong from his mother's words just now, and he was also worried about Wusong. "Come here, my Jack." Caddy hugged Jack and prayed for a miracle to happen. Meow. The New Year's goal is to update more, the number of words of 3 Dream of Red Mansions. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 452. When the alarm of GIMZ sounded, the original body sleeping in Europe was also awakened. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Luo Guang also felt a little annoyed. It was only a few days after the previous attack, and there was another attack. Fortunately, he did not do late-night exercise with Jill tonight, otherwise he would be angry to death. So he did not get angry, or get up and go to the balcony to avoid Jill. He just hugged Jill, who was sleeping soundly, and began to control the clone Wusong lying on the bed. As the battle became more and more intense, Luo Guang's original body inevitably tensed up. However, because he had done some exercises before, if he could not distinguish the feelings of the original body and the clone well, it would easily lead to deformation of the control action and affect the accuracy of the control. So he quickly regained his calm and did not disturb Jill, who was sleeping in his arms. He did not tell Jill about the clone. Things like having a virus in the body have precedence in this era, so it is not strange. Jill didn't care much after confirming that it was not contagious, but if it was a clone, it would be different. Luo Guang could think of how to use the clone to do all kinds of bad things, and he would not leave any handle after failure. But in the same way, he could also use this ability to fight on 2 fronts, or even on multiple fronts after his mental power is stronger, to solve more biochemical crisis incidents simultaneously and reduce casualties. Don't think that GIMZ can basically get away with the mission, because GIMZ is the world's best anti-biochemical force. The FBC, which is composed of professional soldiers, also suffered heavy losses in various incidents, not to mention the BSAA, which is composed of some former police officers and former firefighters. If Luo Guang hadn't discovered the truth about the unknown virus in the Peace Cough incident, and if the arrival time hadn't been deliberately delayed, the BSAA would probably have lost a lot of manpower like the army of the Bear Country. From this incident, we can see the importance of reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, but only a few people can do this job. Based on Luo Guang's understanding of Jill, the other party will definitely not let him use this very dangerous ability, but he can't give it up, which may lead to a dispute between the two sides. So before finding a solution, he decided not to tell Jill about this for the time being. Jill knew the true identity of Gimz Wusong, so he also had to prepare an explanation. For example, he was actually Wusong's substitute at certain times, serving him. Or vice versa, in order to avoid people with ulterior motives suspecting that Luo Guang and Wusong, who never appeared in the same frame, had problems. He found a trustworthy person, who turned into Wusong's appearance through plastic surgery and other methods, and worked for him, etc. Back to the destruction of the clone, Luo Guang quickly thought of a way to resurrect Wusong. Not long ago, he created a new clone and went to the Gimz Institute with the demon worm. That identity was not absorbed back into his body, but turned into another person and went to Africa. The purpose was two things. The first was to secretly investigate Wesker's affairs, or the affairs of Sanli and company. The second thing was to find an opportunity to go to Gimz and appear in the same frame with Wusong's clone. So he just needed to turn this clone into Wusong's appearance and go back to the base. As for the resurrection from the dead, Luo Guang made the Wusong clone instantly produce eternal toxins in his body, crystallized the clone, and then crushed it into slag with artillery fire, which could be said to be dead without evidence. If he was lucky, Wesker would definitely be poisoned if he got his blood, but he was finally freed by the other party. The people of Gimz couldn't find his body, so there was a possibility that he was not dead. This was a common plot in many film and television worlds. There was a solution to this problem, and there was another thing he needed to think about. That was the reason why Wesker attacked the Gimz base at night. Because of the battle, he and Wesker did not communicate much. Of course, the other party should bear the blame, because he wanted to chat a few words at first, but Wesker did not follow the martial ethics and launched a sneak attack, so Luo Guang failed to get information from the conversation. According to what has happened so far, Luo Guang can't get much information, but from the video forwarded by Hong Huang to his second clone, Wesker is likely to betray the poison sect and join the parasite sect. The enemy in the previous attack also had parasites in his body, which just happened to correspond. In other words, the last attack was also done by Sanli and company. However, Luo Guang did not think that Wesker came here to get back the ground for the previous failure, and the other party was not that bored. Moreover, before Wusong's clone intercepted the other party, he saw from the surveillance that the other party should be looking for something, so he kept breaking the door in the office building to check the situation in the room. He had a slight guess about this, because the only thing worth looking for in the entire Gimz was his biological son, wasn't it? Thinking of this, Luo Guang wondered whether he should explain Wesker's matter to Caddy and her son. Gimz South Africa base. Tanya led the team to the square. Hank's Death Squad and Victor's Wolf Squad also came here to clean up the battlefield. The others went to the office building to perform the task of guarding. Tomorrow, the troops of the African branch of BSAA will also arrive here to collect information related to parasites. It will be safer to check the entire training ground when there are more people. After all, the enemy was discovered after entering the training ground this time. Samus was worried that the enemy would come back and kill again, so she adopted a centralized defense strategy. Tanya squatted on the ground, picked up a piece of crystal powder with her gloved hands, and put it into the scanner she carried with her. The foot that grew out of Wesker's back at the end made everyone understand that this was a biochemical crisis, so she brought out the scanner to confirm which fragments were from the enemy and which were from Wusong. However, the results showed that these things were related to the Eternal virus. Tanya, who participated in the Berlin incident, thought that she was right. Why are there crystals of the eternal virus here? She was full of doubts and whispered to herself. Tanya did not tell the story. After saying hello to others, she took the scanner back to find Samus. Victor sneaked up to Hank and said, "You said the boss." "He's still alive," Hank interrupted him. After confirming that there was no one around, he whispered, "Do you think the boss is a fool? If he can't handle it, he can just let us pay a heavy price to cooperate with him to solve the enemy. Is there any need to sacrifice ourselves?" "That's right," Victor nodded and asked, "Speaking of this, do you have the confidence to beat the enemy named Wesker?" Hank shook his head to indicate that he couldn't beat him, and then told the other party what the boss had said to him. "The boss didn't tell me these things." Victor was a little unhappy, because he had become the other party's retainer. Hank explained, "At first, the boss just wanted me to hold him back, and you weren't part of the plan. And we've been acting together recently, so he didn't think he needed to say it again." "That's right." Hank brought the topic back and said, "This enemy's speed and strength were only comparable to the boss at first, but he became stronger after a while. I can't beat both forms." Although he wanted to challenge a strong enemy, Victor was not the kind of person who would die. "In that case, where is the boss going?" Victor checked another piece of minced meat, and after confirming it, he burned it with a blowtorch. Hank shook his head and said, "He didn't say anything." "Wait." Tanya came to Samu's office and looked around. "What are you looking for?" Samus, who was checking the surveillance video behind the desk, noticed the other party's small movements. Tanya closed the door and asked back, "Didn't Katie come to you?" She thought Katie would ask the other party about the situation after the incident was over. Samus replied, "No, but I have hinted to the other party a little. I hope the other party can bear this blow." Tanya replied, "I am not worried about her. After all, she still has Jack, so she won't be upset." Samus nodded, agreed with the other party's statement, and asked, "What do you want to see me about?" "I found traces of the eternal virus at the scene." Tanya showed the scanner screen to the other party. As the commander-in-chief of the Red Claws, Samus naturally knew all the details of the Berlin incident. She was surprised and said, "The virus has spread out." The Berlin incident can be said to be of great importance. Germany at that time can be said to have used all its national strength to block the news and stop the leakage of the virus. From the conclusion, yes, Tanya thought for a while and asked, "Should we tell Germany? Can you prove that these viruses are from the enemy?" Samus is no longer a member of the Red Claws and has no obligation to notify the other party. Tanya shook her head and said, "There is no way to prove it. Neither the enemy nor us can see the characteristics of the eternal virus monster." She added, "And the video of the boss fighting the enemy cannot be transmitted, right?" Samus turned the computer screen to Tanya and said, "Look at this video and pay attention to the time. The video shows the boss fighting the enemy. It is different from what the naked eye saw just now. The speed of the two fighting is faster than that of elite soldiers, but it is already within the range that the naked eye can capture." Suspecting that Samus adjusted the slow playback, Tanya looked at the time. The time flow is normal. Then she asked Samus, "Did you modify the video?" "It wasn't me, it was the people in the security room who did it," she continued. "They said they received a call from the boss." Before or after, Tanya was referring to the time before and after the boss was covered by artillery fire. After. Hearing this, Tanya couldn't help but open her mouth slightly, opened her eyes wide, and said slowly, "So the boss is really not dead?" When she said this, she still looked unbelievable. "How did he do it?" Samus didn't know, and there was no underground passage in the square, so she couldn't answer the other party's question. The office fell into silence, with only the light of the computer screen flickering. Luo Guan controlled the second clone and transformed it into Wusong's appearance. As for its combat power, it was no different from Wusong himself. This clone took 5 hours to get to Cape Town, South Africa, and then walked to the GIMZ base, entered from the emergency escape entrance, and then used the surveillance video that Red Emperor gave to the security room to play the loop video. He successfully sneaked back to his office without being discovered by anyone. Next, he thought about how to appear. He first picked up the intercom in the office, adjusted the channel and contacted Hank and Victor. Both of them were in their own team's channel, so other team members could also hear Wusong's voice. "Boss," as expected, Wolf Mother exclaimed, attracting the attention of the people who were cleaning up the battlefield. Hank smiled slightly, and the big stone in his heart was put down. Although he received the boss's notice, he still felt relieved when he saw the scene of mutual destruction. Hank and Victor temporarily put down their work and went to the boss's office, while others also stopped working and whispered, discussing how the boss survived. "Boss," the two entered Wusong's office. Victor asked, "Boss, how did you survive this artillery fire and heavy machine gun attack?" "That's my stand," Wusong said seriously, "he chose the red pill like you and served me." Victor's first reaction was to ask, "Will I become as powerful as him?" And Hank also had a lot of questions in his mind. When did he come? He can't have been hiding here all the time. Did you receive any intelligence, boss? As for whether the stand really sacrificed himself voluntarily, based on his understanding of the boss, it is more likely that he did so voluntarily, and that's what a retainer is like, so he didn't raise this question. Luo Guan controlled Wusong to answer Victor's question first. He is more adaptable to the virus than you are, so it is basically impossible for you to become as strong as him. Wusong looked at Victor worriedly. He felt that this guy was the kind of guy who would go to extremes to become stronger, so he added, "Victor, your virus adaptability is only C+, and this is the result of my virus modification." Luo Guang had already analyzed the virus adaptability of his subordinates, and continued, "That is to say, most viruses in the world are not suitable for you, so don't think about finding viruses by yourself." Victor took the other party's words to heart and asked, "What about you, boss?" "I am A level, Hank is B level." Luo Guang deliberately lowered his own adaptability registration. "This is the worst." Victor was depressed. "Haha, the reason why Hank is B level is related to a certain operation of Umbrella Corporation. If I hadn't given him the power, he might have been forced to retire after serving for another 2 or 3 years. Hank took over Wusong's words and told what happened that year. Victor was a little disappointed. In his opinion, as long as he could become stronger, it didn't matter if he lost a few years of life. "Okay, wait until you fully explore all the potential in your body before thinking about the future." This actually meant that Victor was too ambitious. Wusong continued, "And in the future, there will be new versions of this virus, and it is not fixed, so you still have a long way to go." After solving Victor's problem, he turned around and was about to answer Hank's question when he heard a knock on the door. Samu's voice sounded outside the door. "Boss, can I come in?" "Meow, thank you for the double monthly ticket and subscription." "Meow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 453. Come in. Wusong said something to the person outside the door, and then answered Hank's previous question. "I was preparing to assign him a task to investigate the company that attacked our base before, and it just happened that the enemy was attacking. The fact that the double did not come into the base's surveillance records was a loophole, but people who heard this probably wouldn't bother to check the footage. But Luo Guang is a very safe person. When he came, he had already asked the Red Emperor to replace the video of him coming in from the emergency channel with the video of the previous few days. Is it worth it?" Since the boss didn't say anything, Hank did not avoid Samu's and continued his question. He doesn't want to be treated as a tool that can be discarded at any time. When Sams came in and saw his boss talking to Hank, he didn't interrupt and sat on the sofa. She only found out that her boss was hiding in the office after receiving the news from Tanya's team members. The only thing she was curious about was why her boss didn't immediately come forward to clarify the rumors of his death. Luo Guang borrowed Wu Song's words and replied, "It was originally worth it. Wesker has the ability to destroy the entire world. Unfortunately, the enemy is not dead. I misjudged the enemy's strength. The enemy is much stronger than the intelligence said. He didn't dare to let go in the previous battle. He really wanted to kill Wesker. If Wesker was really killed with one clone, it would definitely be a big profit." When Samus heard this, he couldn't sit still and interjected, "Can this enemy do all this?" She obviously didn't believe that one person could be so powerful. Luo Guang was someone who knew Plaka's parasite. He changed the Illuminati's plan to rule the world and put it directly on Wesker's head. Anyway, a dog's mouth can't grow tusks, and Wesker will definitely not use parasites to do good things. So as long as he spreads the Plaka parasite, he can control the entire world. Samus thought of the other party's previous arrangements and said, "So after the last attack, you immediately contacted BSAA to make the world more vigilant against parasites. Although the devil worm has also been publicized, it is different from the Plaka parasite. Countries do not pay that much attention to it, especially those far away from the furry bear country." After thinking for a while, she asked, "I heard you said that the attack was related to Sanli and Company, so why don't you let me tell B.S.A.A? We have no evidence. With the size of our GIMZ force, a head-on confrontation with Sanli and Company is like hitting an egg with a stone." Luo Guang revealed his plan, that Wesker is not the talker of Sanli and Company, so in order to control Sanli and Company, he will definitely choose to spread the Plaka parasite internally. Samus understood and said, "So asking BSAA to remind Sanlian is to make them dog eat dog. The premise is that Sanli and Company has not been completely penetrated. This can be judged through Sanli and Company's subsequent response." Wu Song nodded, "That's right." After learning about the enemy this time, Samus told her the questions she had thought about before coming over. Luo Guang controlled Wu Song to explain the substitute messenger again. "If you and the sacrificed warrior fight against the enemy together, won't the opponent need to sacrifice themselves?" Sams didn't give any face to his boss and asked very pointed questions. Wu Song smiled bitterly and said, "Not much difference. After the enemy suddenly becomes stronger, he can only defend to the death or avoid the enemy's attack. Counterattack is impossible." He was also explaining it to Hank and Victor, and continued, "The enemy's attack power reaches a certain threshold, and it is useless to attack one by two. His and I's attack power cannot be limited to cause damage, and the enemy's attack power can be temporarily deprived by one strike. Our ability to keep fighting." With this said, the three of them can understand. Back to the question, if we can detect the enemy immediately and prevent the enemy from approaching with a hail of bullets like in the final battle, then there is no need to sacrifice. But the situation at that time was that the enemy had already invaded the office building. Luo Guang looked at Samus and said, "In order to ensure the safety of everyone, I must immediately send people to stop the opponent and drive the enemy out of the room. There are too many indoor bunkers, which instead provide cover for Wesker. Except for Hank and Victor, who can fight Wesker a few times, everyone else is broken at a touch. His only mistake was miscalculating Wesker's progress. Luo Guang's current intelligence network can confirm biohazard incidents occurring in most places around the world at any time. As long as Wesker appears in them, he can detect them, thereby confirming Wesker's integration progress." Unexpectedly, Wesker, who had always believed that biochemical viruses were the right path in the game, suddenly chose the path of parasites and achieved overtaking in a corner. By the way, This does not mean that the divine parasite is better than the Shinra virus, but the difference is caused by the two different pathways of parasites and viruses. For example, the Shinwei parasite has a weakness. Although it will not kill the parasite, as the source of Wesker's power, the parasite will directly deprive Wesker of his power after death, which does not exist with Luo Guang. After hearing the boss's words, Samus and Hank both nodded, but Samus and the others still had a question. Why does that person look exactly like Boss Yu? Is he a twin? I have no biological brother, Samus Luo Guang said. Actually, I made it very clear before that he is my substitute messenger. I deliberately made him look like me to confuse the enemy. Since she is a stand-in, it is normal that she looks very similar to him. Then his original identity. Orphan Wusong only said one word, and then let the other person figure it out. Just as he thought, the other party made up a touching story in his mind, so the substitute voluntarily sacrificed himself. Sams didn't question anything, he believed his boss's statement, and finally said silently, "In the future, you can write down such things on paper and notify me." She didn't like being lied to, but considering the time constraints of the attack, she didn't say anything more. Then let me tell you in advance, I still have many substitutes. Wu Songxiao told us shocking news. Hank thought about his boss's words and asked with some confusion, "Boss, they are all related to?" He secretly looked at Samus, wondering if he had become the boss's retainer. Although the boss didn't seem to avoid the other person's presence when they just chatted, it was better to be cautious about this matter. Luo Guang noticed the other party's movements, understood what the other party wanted to ask, and replied, "Same as Chen Bingqian." Without Wu Songming's explanation, others could understand that this name should be the real name of the sacrificed substitute. In fact, this was just a name Luo Guang came up with temporarily to make his previous statement more true. Samus was surprised. "They look the same as you, boss. Won't this cause a big problem?" She obviously misunderstood the true meaning of the conversation between the two. Judging from these words, Hank and Victor also understood that the other party was not Wu Song's retainer. Wu Song turned to look at the other person, looked into each other's eyes, and said, "The substitutes have their own lives. They don't always maintain my appearance. They are usually scattered around to perform tasks." Samus thought of his boss's intelligence network, and by default regarded those stand-ins as intelligence agents who were usually responsible for collecting intelligence. She said, "Is Luo Guang also your substitute messenger?" Luo Guang was the only GIMZ intelligence agent Samus knew and could be considered her friend, so she asked with concern. Wu Song's expression was natural and he said without any pause, "He is not. To be precise, he is my partner. He helped a lot when GIMZ was first established." Hank nodded along with Samus, both of them knew Luo Guang. Finished talking about what happened before. Next, they discussed the next plan. Luo Guang controlled the clone to tell what he had guessed, and decided to give Sanli and company some color. Victor was afraid that he would not have a chance to fight, but Hank was a high-quality tool man and would not easily disobey orders. Therefore, Samus could only raise an objection and said, "Boss, did you say before that this was an egg striking a stone?" "That's right, so just like cleaning up the Sanli and Company intelligence network before, we will not do these things in the name of GIMZ. I will assign people from other organizations to take charge." Samus nodded and said, "In this case, there is room for maneuver if there is any problem. It's just that when we do good deeds, we never leave our names behind. We only write them down in our diaries at most. No matter what, we have to discuss various countermeasures." The steady Hank ignored the boss's joke and mentioned it. He had a hunch that the task of finding trouble would be handed over to him and Victor. Wu Song nodded and said, "I know. But the first priority now is to continue to improve the security and early warning measures of the base. I don't want to sacrifice my people anymore." Samus immediately stepped up and said she would make a new security plan based on tonight's events. After everyone confirmed their work, they left the office. "That's right, boss." Sams, who was walking at the end, turned his head and said, "Catty, boss, please go there and explain in person, she is still worried about you." Wusong nodded and stood up. In a small village 10 kilometers away from Cape Town, the ground was soaked with blood. A blond man who showed off his figure without any reservation stood up from the ground. This person is none other than Wesker, who defeated Mei Cheng. As the divine parasite controlled him to eat up all the creatures in the village, his injuries had completely recovered, but the wounds in his heart would never heal. What was originally a surefire move ended up leaving him in such embarrassment. The huge gap made him very uncomfortable. The moment he was covered by gunfire, he once again felt the fear of death. Fortunately he is still alive, so he still has a chance for revenge, and he has learned from this failure. At the same time, this incident convinced him of the correctness of his current plan to dominate the world in Peacecoff. For example, as more and more of his parasitic subordinates increase, if he uses heavy firepower like Wusong, will he be able to easily defeat his mortal enemy? Unintentionally, Wesker also began to move towards the superior fire theory of caliber being the truth. But when he thought about Wusong's courage to regard death as his own, he had to admire him. He would definitely not do such a thing, so he would need to find another way to restrict Luo Guang's movement. After thinking about it, Wesker thought of nuclear weapons. As long as the damage range is large enough, there is no need to restrict the movement of the deadly enemy. He could secretly place it in the city where his mortal enemy was, and then directly detonate it to make his mortal enemy disappear into ashes, and he would not know that it was his own good deed until he died. Just thinking of doing this, he seemed unable to humiliate the other party. If he could not return the humiliation and ridicule of the other party 100-fold, then he felt that even if he really succeeded, there would only be a piece missing in his heart, and he would not be happy at all. So Wesker gave up this plan. He walked to a mud house and took a set of linen clothes from the hanger. Wesker had never worn such rough clothes in his life, which made him look very miserable. He wore clothes not because of shame, but because he felt that not wearing clothes would affect his style. After all, he was a perfectionist. The memory of the Shinwei parasite controlling his body was still retained, so Wesker did not get lost and returned to the GIMZ base. Their boss Wusong was already dead, and the other party would not expect him to recover so quickly. So if he killed a sneak attack, no one could stop him. With his guard up, he would not be defeated by the same move. Not only did Wesker kidnap Jack Mueller, he also wanted to destroy the entire GIMZ to avenge the other party's slap in his face. And Excella, who was far away in the Secret Research Institute, was also angry. But she was not angry because Wesker was defeated and seriously injured, but because she could not see her man's heroic fighting. The monitoring satellite in her hand lost contact halfway and interrupted the live broadcast. The reason is very simple: the satellite was destroyed by Luo Guang. It was not that he fired an electromagnetic cannon into the sky to knock down the satellite, and the electricity consumed was not something he could supply alone. Luo Guang just asked Hong Huang to slightly change the course of the weather satellite that invaded other countries, and then knock down the enemy's satellite. This was a small task he assigned to Hong Huang when he realized that Sanli and company might have satellite monitoring during the second attack. Originally, Red Emperor could directly access the network of Tri-Union Company to overload the monitoring satellite, but he didn't want to expose the work that Red Emperor was doing, so he had to sacrifice the weather satellites of other countries. Although Tri-Union Company still had a satellite, that satellite was used in cooperation with the local government, so Excella had no way to call it and could only stay at the base waiting for Wesker's contact. However, after the expected time, Wesker didn't contact her, which made her a little worried. Wesker is very strong now, and ordinary firearms can't hurt him, but because the other party is so powerful, he should complete the task and contact her soon. So Excella immediately sent someone over to investigate the situation and to meet the other party. Wesker didn't know these things, and his mobile phone had been recovered by the GIMZ troops who were clearing the battlefield. He was thinking about how to make GIMZ pay the price, and ran to the destination quickly. Meow, thank you for subscribing and voting meow. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Meow. Chapter 454. Wusong came to the door of Cuddy's room and did not knock to enter. Luo Guang had never been to Cuddy's room before, and those words about CAO thieves were more of a joke. Of course, objectively speaking, Wesker's woman and son are indeed raised by him now. He did not have too many thoughts about Cuddy, but only cared about the mother and son because Jack was the protagonist of the game Resident Evil 6 and Luo Guang had some bad taste. It was a coincidence that he met Jack so early. According to previous information, Cuddy should be devoted to the man who abandoned her. Luo Guang did not expect that he did not deliberately pursue him, but the other party secretly fell in love with him. The clone Wusong sighed, prepared himself mentally, knocked on the door, and introduced himself. Cuddy, it's me. There was no need to say the name. Although there was a door between them, Cuddy still heard who was outside the door at the first time. After she held Jack and cried for half an hour, she let him go and sat on the bed in a daze for several hours. Jack also accompanied his mother throughout the whole process, praying with her for a miracle. Jack, did I hear it wrong? I seemed to hear Wusong calling my name. Obviously, Caddy had not recovered yet and thought he was hallucinating. Jack was the same. He sat with his mother for a long time and his brain was not working for a while. He said, I seemed to hear it too, and there was a knock on the door. His eyes, which had lost their luster, began to brighten. Caddy stood up, but because he kept the same posture, his body became stiff and shook. Jack hurriedly supported his mother who was unsteady, or they supported each other. Wusong knocked on the door again and said, Caddy? Are you there? He actually heard some movement inside, but he was also preparing himself mentally, so he continued to knock on the door to ask after a while. The footsteps were getting closer and closer, and the door was opened. The anxious Caddy pushed Jack, who was also trying to get out, away and hugged Wusong directly. Luo Guang, who was far away in Europe, immediately shut down the body sense of his clone. He didn't want to be stimulated at all. As the Shinra virus appeared and became stronger, his instinctive impulse became stronger, especially when he was in Peacecoff City. Jill was by his side, but because of the sound insulation problem, he had been resisting the urge to reproduce. Although Jill also updated the virus in his body when communicating with him, his improvement was much worse than Luo Guang's, and there was a big gap in physical fitness. In summary, it was not enough fun, and it could only play a role in relief. Jill also knew Luo Guang's predicament. After getting used to it, she would not hang up the free battle card like before, but Luo Guang couldn't always ask the other party to cooperate every night, right? Caddy didn't know that what she was holding was just a clone. The tears that had been crying dry rolled in her eyes and soon soaked the clothes on the other party's chest. Now the tears that flowed out were happy tears. Jack, who was squeezed away by his mother, didn't complain about anything and showed a bright smile. Seeing his mother hugging the other, he smiled like an old father, feeling that his mother finally took the initiative to a. Then Jack looked at Wusong, nodded and shook his head. He nodded because Wusong did not push his mother away, which was a good sign. He shook his head because Wusong did not hug his mother in return, just standing there like a piece of wood, with his hands very polite. He would share this with Shirley in the next letter he sent to her. That's right, Jack and Shirley are now pen pals. The location of Shirley's research institute is not public, so Jack sent it to a hospital, and then the people there checked the content of the letter and forwarded it to the research institute. After hugging Wusong and crying for a while, Caddy said, "You scared me to death. What will happen to us mother and son if you are not here? I have arranged the funeral." Luo Guang had prepared a will when he established GIMZ. Before he had a clone, he also made the worst plan. Although everyone called them mercenaries, GIMZ was still a registered company. According to relevant regulations, it can be inherited, so the first in his will at that time was Jill, and then Chris. Jill might suffer because of her actions, but Chris certainly won't, because Luo Guang would never go to play with Chris. As for why it was not given to Leon, it was also because of Leon's official status, which was very simple. However, now that Luo Guang has obtained the Blood Plague clone skill, he slightly changed the will and replaced the first heir with himself in the GIMZ inheritance order. Hearing this, Jack slapped his forehead with one hand, feeling depressed. How could he say such a thing now? Caddy looked at Wusong in surprise, and she saw only a firm look in his eyes. For those in our line of work, this is something we have to face sooner or later, Luo Guang said the fact nakedly. But you are the boss, why do you have to do such a dangerous thing yourself? Caddy couldn't understand why she couldn't rely on others for help like the attacks she encountered before. Although Kaidi did not peek at the battle, it seemed that the sound of gunfire appeared after a long time, and the enemy had already entered the office building, so the other party must not have arranged for others to help immediately. Wusong did not answer immediately, but just said, "Let's go in and talk." Talking loudly in the corridor is not a good influence, and he wants to talk to the other party about Wesker, which is even more inconvenient to leak out. Caddy did not hold on and let the other party in. Wusong continued, "The enemy this time is different. Others can't stop him, and we found it too late. The other party has invaded here. You will be in danger." It sounds like he went to the battle in person to protect Caddy and her son. Caddy was stunned and whispered, "Your statement is too cunning." Jack on the side was confused by Wusong's half-god and half-ghost operation. He couldn't figure out whether the other party was really emotionally wooden. Wusong's explanation just now was the truth, because the biggest possibility of Wesker's attack here in the middle of the night was to discover the existence of Caddy and Jack, and he didn't deliberately brush up his favorability. "The attacker may target you too." Wusong spoke to break the silence in the room. Caddy and Jack showed surprise on their faces. Especially for Caddy, she didn't know anyone except the people from GIMZ, and her friends were basically all employees of GIMZ. No. She was smart and suddenly thought of a possibility, and asked tremblingly, "Is it Jack's father?" Wusong hinted that he knew Wesker when he met her that year. Later, she left Jack aside and asked privately and got a positive answer, but at that time the other party did not explain how he knew him, nor did he say where the man was and what he was doing. Jack looked at his mother in disbelief, and then looked at Wusong. He didn't want the man to appear and hinder his mother's pursuit of a happy life. "I'm sorry, Jack. Albert Wesker, your father is the attacker." Wusong told the cruel truth. Caddy's body suddenly softened, and she felt a little dizzy due to the huge emotional fluctuations. Wusong quickly supported the other party and said, "Sorry, I should wait until you recover before talking about this." "I'm fine." Although the other party said so, Wusong still helped the other party to sit down on the chair. "What is the purpose of him, that unfaithful man, coming here? To fight for Jack's custody?" Caddy didn't think that the other party came to reconcile with her now. "You are not married." Wusong shook his head and didn't keep it a secret. He continued, "But he is likely to come for Jack." The afterglow of surprise was still there. Jack didn't ask immediately, but Caddy asked, "Why?" "He left before I got pregnant and didn't care about us mother and son at all. If it weren't for the current life, she might have been fascinated by Wesker and felt that he could give Jack a better life, but after experiencing these things, Caddy felt that the current life was the most suitable for herself and her son." Jack also came back to his senses and said, "I won't be separated from my mother. I don't want to go with a stranger." "You think too well. If it's just for Jack's custody, then the person who came here should be a lawyer, not a guy who came uninvited and trespassed on private territory." Wusong looked at Jack and said, "Wesker's plan is likely to kidnap Jack and then threaten us to let him leave with the hostage." Luo Guang didn't think Wesker would care about this woman, Caddy, but he didn't say such a thing. Why kidnap Jack? Caddy didn't accept Wusong's statement completely, because the other party also used words like high probability and possible, indicating that the other party was just guessing. Wusong replied, "Because Jack is his child, he may have inherited Wesker's ability, which is particularly important to him." He thought of the experience of the birth of the Ouroboros virus. Without Jill to provide antibodies, Jack seemed to have the same ability. Could he still make the Ouroboros virus? However, Wesker has now changed his evolutionary route, and it is likely that he will not consciously study the Ouroboros virus. On the other hand, with his current level of knowledge, it seems that he can use the antibodies in Jack's body to try to make the Ouroboros virus and strengthen himself. As soon as Wusong finished speaking, Jack immediately said, "I didn't inherit any good things from that bastard." Caddy said, "You can't swear." She didn't blame her son for swearing at his biological father. Yes, Jack looked indignant, and he had already used the words with the lowest offensive power to swear. Compared with the swear words he learned from the GIMZ soldiers, now these words are as elegant as aristocratic words. Wusong said, "You have. Don't you think that your physical fitness has always been far ahead of your peers, and people who are a few years older than you can't compare with you? This is the good physique your father inherited from you. That's because those people only know how to study and pick up girls all day long, and lack exercise. Otherwise, how could I beat 10 people alone?" Jack refused to admit that he got Wesker's excellent genes. Luo Guang would not force Jack to accept this, and controlled Wusong to say to Kaidi, "You should know this. I was pregnant with Jack for a year before giving birth, and the doctor said that he was heavier and healthier than ordinary children. Heavy here does not mean fat. Fortunately, it was not 3 years and 6 months of pregnancy." Luo Guang thought of Neza and complained in his heart. Controlling the clone, he continued, "Jack, I have checked your body. In addition to your physical fitness, you also inherited your father's immunity to various biochemical viruses." Jack's tears were rolling in his eyes. He was crying in anger and shouted, "I don't want the special abilities that man passed on to me." Hearing this, Luo Guang thought of the story of Neza who cut off his bones to return to his father and cut off his flesh to return to his mother. Caddy sighed and said, "I understand your feelings. He is indeed sorry for you, but this is a fact that cannot be changed." "Uncle Wu, why did my father leave you and me?" Caddy couldn't answer the question Jack asked, because she didn't know either. Wusong saw that Caddy was silent and thought she didn't want to say it. He noticed Jack's gaze and said, "Albert Wesker, you can find out who he is by looking it up on the internet." Caddy personally opened the laptop in the room. She had never paid attention to the man since she raised Jack. At first, it was because raising Jack had taken up a lot of her time and energy, and then she wanted to say goodbye to the past, and it was even more impossible for her to take the initiative to search for things related to Wesker. Opening the search website, typing in Wesker's name, a BSAA wanted order came into view. The main reason for the wanted order was that he was one of the perpetrators of the Raccoon City incident and the mastermind of some small-scale biochemical crisis incidents. The two fell into silence. Katie didn't know that Wesker was such a person. Recalling that she naively thought that the man knew about her and Jack, but because of her difficulties, she entrusted Wusong, a close friend, to come. Now it seems that Wusong knew about this matter a long time ago, so he was vague and didn't explain in detail how he knew about her and her son. But the two were close friends who fought to the death, So why did Wusong know her mother and son? While she was sad, she also had some questions in her heart. Jack naturally didn't expect that his kind-hearted mother liked a heinous person. Silence became the theme of the room again. Katie checked the content of other websites again, and without exception, they reported how many sins the man she once liked had. At this time, Jack had no intention of comforting his mother, and his heart was also in a mess. It was Wusong who broke the silence and sighed, "Alas, I originally planned to wait until Jack came of age to tell him about this." "No, Uncle Wu," Jack wiped the tears from his eyes and said, "I am very grateful that you told me these things now. He is a strong child." Jack Caddy looked worried that he could not accept such a fact. Jack knew what his mother was worried about and said, "I'm fine, I'll go out and relax." "Wait a minute, I'll find someone to accompany you. Your father may come back." "No, in that case I'll go back to my room." Jack's room was next door. Wusong was very busy and he didn't want to trouble him. After the two confirmed that Jack really went back to his room, they returned to Caddy's own room. Caddy closed the door, turned around and asked, "Wusong, you and that person are not really friends of life and death, right? That person didn't tell you about us either." "That's right." Wusong thought the other party was going to ask how he knew about the two of them. However, for Caddy now, these things don't matter. She said, "If that's the case, why are you so good to us?" Wusong couldn't say that it was because Jack was a familiar game character, so he replied, "You are good people, and helping people in need doesn't need a reason." Caddy said, "I understand, so you won't give up going to the front line, because you want to help more people." Wusong answered the other party's question with silence. "Let me help you within my ability." Caddy was determined to follow the other party. Wusong replied, "No, you and Jack need to move to a safe place. It's not safe here anymore." "No, it's safe where you are." Caddy persuaded the other party, saying, "If we hide in a place where you are not, we can't resist if the other party comes to our door." Luo Guang didn't insist, and controlled Wusong to answer, "In that case, you and Jack can only stay here until the matter is over." Caddy nodded and agreed with the other party's statement. If the other party is unwilling to leave, Luo Guang will have to prepare to implement Plan B, which is to find someone to pretend to be the two of them and leave the GIMZ base. Anyway, the base is not open now, the enemy satellite has been shot down, and the intelligence network destroyed before should have a high probability of deceiving the enemy. After talking about the matter, Wusong looked at his watch and saw that the people from BSAA were about to arrive, so he said, "Let's do this first, I have other things to deal with." "Well, I'll go see Jack's situation too." Caddy also stood up and walked out the door with the other party. Meow, try to break the limit of 4,000 words a day. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 455. Chapter 446. Trader of FBC. Wesker came to the outskirts of GIMZ and checked the situation across the road. One thing that is different from before is that there are no security guards in the security room at the main entrance. He was not so blinded by anger that he did not rush in, but pondered the meaning behind the situation. If the security personnel return to their posts and act as if the matter is over, then they will feel that the other party is just using an empty city tactic, but in fact they are powerful from outside. Now that the security is gone, it is obvious that the GIMZ troops are still preventing themselves from attacking again, because they must know that the few security guards cannot stop his attack, so they will withdraw them without making unnecessary sacrifices. The enemy must have been prepared, and there were a large number of surveillance cameras inside. There was no need to take risks. He turned around and left, arriving at the place where he hid the car. Wesker did not give up his plan. After changing into new clothes, he took out his spare mobile phone from the car and contacted Axela. "Sir, are you okay?" Axela said very excitedly, I haven't been able to contact you, and I have sent someone over to check the situation. Very good. Are the people sent here armed? If there were more people, he would have more options. Only carrying some small arms. Weeks thought for a while and then said, have the satellites seen the enemy since I left the GIMZ base? I need more information. In a few words, Excella guessed that the other party had an accident in his mission, but she would not expose the other party's scars. She revealed the problem with the satellite and said, the satellite has lost response. We are investigating the cause, so we are unable to provide intelligence support. Damn it, Wesker cursed secretly. Excella continued to tell the intelligence she had collected, however, our people in the BSAA Africa branch sent us a message that they have sent people to the GIMZ base. Wesker asked, approximately when will they arrive? Originally, he planned to ask the other party to bring more manpower to storm the GIMZ base. As long as someone distracts him from the enemy's firepower and ensures that he can enter the enemy's building, he will be invincible. But if people from BSAA came to support, everything would be hard to say. Can you stop the BSAA people? Our undercover only knows this, but the other party's specific route of action and arrival time are not clear. The spy's status was not high. If this is the case, if I take action, I may alert the enemy, and the gain outweighs the loss. Wesker himself was not sure of stopping the team sent by the other party to convey the news of the attack, and a midway attack might also expose the existence of the undercover. Let the others join me first, then he told the other party his location. However, B.S.A.'s men arrived faster than those sent out by Zila. This is because South Africa, as the most developed country in South Africa, naturally receives B.S.A.'s focus. This place has complete infrastructure and is one of the subdivisions of the branch. Troops are stationed here. However, its headquarters is located in another country called Nigeria. This country is also outstanding in the African region. One sentence can explain how good its economy is. Nigeria is a member of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Compared to South Africa, this country is located in the middle of the African continent and has better coverage, so it was chosen as the location for the headquarters. Wesker looked at the 5 transport helicopters flying in the sky with a bad look on his face. He wanted to pull out the willow tree and throw it up into the sky to hit the helicopter, but in the end he didn't do it. Even if he is fast, he can only knock down a helicopter at most, which is not very helpful to the plan of revenge against GIMZ. Under normal circumstances, before the big event of world domination, GIMZ is just an insignificant grain of sand. When the time comes, he can crush the opponent at any time, so he will spare the opponent's life for the time being. And now that GIMZ has lost its boss, it has no time to disturb its own operations. At the same time, Sanley and Company's satellite was disconnected midway and his embarrassed appearance was not photographed. His face was uncertain, and he finally let out a breath, but he still did not give up the plan to attack GIMZ. Because he thought that his embarrassing appearance was also captured by G.I.M.Z's surveillance equipment. However, Wesker still said to Excella first, the people from BSAA have arrived. One more thing. Can you let the hackers destroy the surveillance data at G.I.M.Z? We have already sent people to try after the satellite failed. Excella also wanted to gain monitoring authority over G.I.M.Z's computer by attacking it. She continued, the 2 hackers contacted failed without exception, and their computers were counter-intruded by the other party's hackers, and a lot of data was stolen by the other party. What made her most angry was that one of the hackers was not as good as others, and he unreasonably asked Sanley and Company to compensate for his losses. Then don't blame her for being unkind. I see. Since it doesn't work there, Wesker can only do it himself. He returned to the gate and climbed over the wall again. He confirmed the position of the BasedonaMovie troops by the noise of the helicopter propellers, and turned to kill them. Wesker was planning to take advantage of the opportunity when the two sides did not merge to eliminate a wave of enemies first. However, he saw the hideous face of the man who wanted to die with him talking to the BasedonaMovie soldiers who had already got off the plane. Wesker immediately stopped. Before he could speak, Wusong, who discovered him, shouted, "This person also participated in the attack on us." Luo Guan concealed the fact that Wesker attacked alone. He did modify the video recording of the base, but he did not expose his own ability while hiding Wesker's true strength. If the BasedonaMovie people saw it, they would misjudge Wesker's ability, and they would only die if they met him in the future. So he did not bring up Wesker's matter separately. The BasedonaMovie members who had just got off the helicopter and were about to gather immediately dispersed, looking for cover while shooting at Wesker's position. They didn't want to hit the enemy, but just wanted to delay the time to enter the bunker. This was the result of their usual training, which just worked. Wesker had no time to dodge. He only had two hands, but he couldn't stop so many flying bullets. Damn it, Wesker didn't want to be beaten half to death again, so he immediately fled the GIMZ base. Wusong didn't let the BasedonaMovie people chase him, and said to the leader Sci-Fi, "Don't chase." But Sci-Fi, who was lying on the ground, stood up. "You can't catch up." Wusong's headphones received a report from the monitoring room, and the other party had already escaped from the base. He said this and continued, "There is a forest outside, where we can't play our advantage in numbers, and we will only be defeated one by one." The main body was not there, and the situation was different from before, so Luo Guan couldn't deal with the other party for the time being. Sci-Fi looked at the enemy who was attacking with bullets and ran away in an instant. He understood how strong the enemy was without saying much, so he agreed with the other party's statement. Wusong, Shiva, and two researchers came to the conference room of the base together, and the BasedonaMovie soldiers began to patrol and inspect the base under the command of Samus. In the conference room, a glass box contained the remains of parasites collected by GIMZ people. These were parasites in the bodies of the members of the Bat Squad. "This parasite is not small." One of the researchers opened his palm, compared it, and asked, "Is it dead?" Many monsters look dead, but they are not dead, so he is very cautious. Wusong opened the lid without saying a word, reached in, grabbed one leg of the parasite, lifted it up and shook it. This operation shocked the three BasedonaMovie people. Not to mention that this was an illegal operation, it was the first time they saw such a reckless person. Usually, people in the institute are very cautious about these things. We GIMZ are professionals, and we will not forget to make up for it. Wusong put down the dead Plaka parasite, closed the glass box, and added. Everyone felt that his actions had nothing to do with his profession. After handing over the parasites, the researcher was escorted back to the BasedonaMovie Research Institute, while Shiva stayed. She was assigned to come here with GIMZ, and there was another task, to discuss the execution of a secret mission. "This is information about Ricardo Irwin." Wusong took the document and said as he read it, "We are also investigating this person. The other party is suspected of buying and selling biological and chemical weapons. We filmed and monitored the other party's transaction process, but the arrest operation failed. The undercover also died. My condolences." Wusong comforted. Shiva shook her head and said, "I just feel angry, even if his sacrifice is valuable. So the next task is to capture the suspect." Wusong saw the approximate location of Irwin's hiding written at the end of the document. Shiva suddenly asked, "Is it safe here? What happens next needs to be kept confidential." Wusong replied, "Then come to my office to talk." His office is equipped with secret cameras, and Hong Huang is responsible for monitoring the entire process. Of course, Luo Guang also considered the issue of privacy. There were no surveillance cameras installed in the lounge, and the cameras outside were not aimed at the computer screen. When he arrived at the office, Shiva said straight to the point, "We received an anonymous report saying that this person was related to the West African branch of Sanley and Company. This matter is known to everyone, right? Irwin himself works at Sanley and Company." If Luo Guang remembered correctly, this seemed to be reported by Ada. But in fact, Shiva was talking about another report that was received recently, and the content was more detailed. "We sent someone to investigate, and the West African branch said that the person had left for several months before. Axela did not do this in order to ensure the other party's loyalty. After all, to do such things, he needs to rely on the protection of Sanley and Company to have a chance to escape punishment, so he cannot cut off the relationship. But now with the Plaka parasite entering his body, Axela is no longer worried about the loyalty issue, so he has cut off the relationship with the other party. So, if the other party said this, there should be other information that Luo Guang and he don't know. We found a biological and chemical weapons production factory based on intelligence. Unfortunately, the enemy had already received the news and abandoned it. I'm listening." Luo Guang, who was far away in Europe, borrowed a clone to listen while he took out his arm and prepared to get up without disturbing Jill. Shiva said, "A few days ago, a person from the FBC defected. No, it should be said that he jumped to our BSAA side." Huh? So weird. There's not much difference in what the two sides do, and the treatment is even better on the FBC side. Shiva answered, "It's not that there is anything wrong with the FBC, it's that she got some information about Sanley and Company through her informants, but FBC is currently cooperating with Sanley and Company, so she jumped over." "It seems that the other party is also warm-hearted," Wusong added casually. Probably Shiva had a general impression of that person. When the other party came to BSAA and told the information, although he looked passionate, he expressed his dissatisfaction with FBC and also expressed his hatred for the biohazard. But Shiva always felt that the other party used too much force and was not natural enough. His life history did not seem to have any hatred for Resident Evil. Of course, this was just a personal feeling, so she didn't say much. Wusong asked, "What information did she bring?" Shiva said, "First, she is the person who reported anonymously, her name is Jessica Silavad." Luo Guang had an impression of this name, but unfortunately it was a villain. "The second point is that the reason why we were short-circuited was because the African branch of Sanley and Company had spies in our branch." Shiva hadn't finished her words yet and continued, "Third, there are new clues about Irwin, and this is related to our next mission. The spies from our branch haven't been dug out yet." Luo Guang felt that it was only for this reason that the other party would ask GIMZ for assistance. Triple Company's power spreads all over the world, so people in other branches are likely to have spies from the company, so GIMZ, whose members are relatively fixed and carefully selected, has become their best choice. Shiva said helplessly, "We are also screening." Sheila Ward only knows that there are spies, but she doesn't know the number or names. Then her informant. She said it needed to be kept secret, and we couldn't ask. Later, they would have to rely on the other party to provide intelligence, so Shiva and the others did not force Jessica to reveal the source of her intelligence. Wusong nodded and said, "Okay, let's talk about the specific plan. You, GIMZ, send 2 people here, and we send 2 people here, to capture Irwin." Shiva first explained the personnel configuration and continued, "The members on our side are me and Silavad." "Well." Wusong lowered his head and touched his chin and said, "When will this mission start?" "When you're ready, you can gather at the headquarters and set off." Jessica was also waiting at the headquarters and did not come over because the clue destination was closer to that side, so there was no need to walk both ways. "Wait a moment." Wusong turned on the computer and pretended to contact other people. Because of what happened to Director Peter before, Luo Guang planned to take this opportunity to see if he could reconnect with the other party, so that he could directly find the enemy's secret research institute. But now his clone can't leave GIMZ, so he has no choice but to let his main body take action and go head-to-head with Wesker. Luo Guang, Jill sat up half asleep and asked, "Isn't today a day off?" That's why they both rarely get up so late. Of course, it was Luo Guang who infected Jill, otherwise Jill would have woken up early. Luo Guang straightened his collar and said, "There is a mission over there at GIMZ, do you want to go with us?" Meow. Speaking of which, BSA in the game is divided into two branches, East Africa and West Africa. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 456. 2 days later, Luo Guang, Hank, Shiva and Jessica gathered in the equipment room of BSAA Africa branch and were packing up the weapons and equipment needed for the mission. In the end, Jill did not go on this mission with Luo Guang because she received a contact from her subordinates just before boarding the plane. Just now, a biochemical crisis broke out in Europe, and the outbreak location was in the city where Sanli and Company's headquarters is located. It happened that her boyfriend was also investigating matters related to Sanli and Company, so she thought it would be a better choice to split up with Luo Guangbing. "We are on a secret mission this time. Are those carrying long guns and short cannons too eye-catching?" Shiva looked at the weapons held by the man with a strange look on her face. In addition to holding an M249 light machine gun, Luo Guang also carried a rocket launcher on his back. This kind of load was child's play for both of them. Jessica didn't think so, and said, "The enemies are those who produce and sell biological and chemical weapons. We will definitely encounter many enemies in this mission. Only by being prepared can we survive." She didn't join BSAA to die. Shiva said, "If we are so high profile, we will only alert others and scare the other party away." Luo Guang also had his own thoughts and replied, "According to your previous investigation, Erwin is an arrogant and defiant guy. Would such a person run away when he sees the four of us? With an absolute disadvantage in numbers, the opponent would definitely let their men swarm up and capture the four of them without thinking of escaping. It's not safe. Shiva won't gamble on this. She must catch Erwin this time. We haven't finalized Erwin's location. Our mission this time is more about investigation and confirmation. Let's leave the arrest to the combat team. But the concerns of others are also true." She thought for a moment and said, "If there is any special situation, the combat team can be ready to support us at any time. In this case, we don't need to be so public about entering. That town is not a place where everyone carries a gun. They will definitely be spotted by Erwin's spies the moment they enter fully armed." Shiva continued, "If Erwin's location is confirmed, we can directly send a combat team to take a helicopter to arrest him, so we don't have to take risks." Hank interjected and asked, "By doing this, we do have much less risk, but we are just afraid of what happens. What if we are discovered? How will the number of enemies be reduced?" According to the other party, the clue was that in a small town, Luo Guang and Hank thought of something when they were discussing the equipment issue. The whole town might be infected. Although this was just an ordinary town in Africa, it had a permanent population of several thousand, so he thought it was necessary to be prepared. Hank has indeed become a lot stronger, but his personality will not change in an instant. In addition, seeing such a powerful Wesker fleeing in panic under gunfire, he does not dare to be negligent in the slightest. Jessica also wanted to convince the other party, but she couldn't think of any good words for a while. According to her understanding, BSAA performed anti-biochemical missions very bravely and was not afraid of death. "How about we use some weapons that can be hidden? I see that many people like to wear windbreakers and cloaks. As long as they can be hidden, that's fine." Luo Guang checked the climate in that place and found that there were windy and sandy days. Hank then said, "And if we don't have enough force, we won't be able to clear out the other party's guards and arrest him when we meet Irwin, right?" Shiva looked at the other three people, agreed to the plan, and said, "Then let's reorganize our equipment and set off in 10 minutes. The paratrooper version of the M249 light machine gun has a total length of 893 mm, and the gun body is relatively thick and difficult to hide even if it is placed in clothes. Of course, there is another way to disassemble it and stuff it into a backpack, but that will take up a lot of backpack capacity and lead to fewer bullets, so Luo Guang and the two changed to other weapons. After discussing for a while, the two chose the Remington M8700 MCS shotgun, a derivative model of the classic style that adopts a modular design and can be freely matched and assembled. There is a Picatinny rail on the top, but for the sake of concealment, neither of them has a sight. There are 4 options for the butt. They chose a pistol grip. Only this one has no butt, but both of them can control it with strength, so there is no need to worry about recoil. As for the barrel, they chose the 14-inch, 355.6 mm version, and the magazine is the 5-round version, and the actual loading capacity is 6 rounds. Except for the shotgun, Luo Guang's secondary weapons and melee weapons are the same as usual. The same is basically the case with Hank, who all use the pistols and daggers he is familiar with. Perhaps considering the need for a lot of close combat, Hank also brought 2 barbed finger tigers. Luo Guang had specialized in flying knives, and he brought many flying knives as assassination weapons. They were also melee weapons when necessary. Of course, the two of them did not forget about powerful weapons. They used their manual skills to improvise a lot of powerful plastic explosives. The 2 ladies Shiva did not choose shotguns. They each chose 2 TMP submachine guns with low recoil as their primary and secondary weapons, and did not bring a pistol. After the 4 of them were prepared and brought spare ammunition that would not affect their speed of action, they boarded the helicopter and headed to the village outside the destination, then changed to a car and entered the destination. They covered their faces with hoods and scarves and arrived at the entrance of a pork shop in silence. The contact person is Leonard Fisher. He is an agent of the Nigerian Ministry of Security and was sent to us as an undercover agent and intelligence agent. After receiving the intelligence, BSAA Africa Division immediately dispatched Leonard to the destination to collect intelligence. After the introduction, Shiva knocked on the closed iron gate, then turned to the other 3 people and whispered, "I will handle it later, please don't interrupt," because he is more sensitive due to work reasons. "Who is it?" A middle-aged male voice came from the store. "Boss, are you in stock today? We want to buy a fresh piglet. There's only one old sow that hasn't been slaughtered yet. Do you want to take a look? Can the old sow give birth to piglets? Why don't you just buy it and take a look, otherwise how would I know? Then I have to look at the goods first." Shiva exchanged secret codes with the other party in the local African tribal language. It was also because she was familiar with the local affairs and language that she became the nominal captain of this mission. If an unexpected situation such as a battle occurs, Luo Guang of the GIMZ unit, who has more combat experience, will be responsible. After a while, the door was opened. The 4 of them filed in and looked inside. The store looked like an ordinary pork shop, except that there wasn't much hanging pork, and it was full of flies. There were even maggots on one of the pigs that had been hung but not yet slaughtered. There was some confusion on Hank's face. If the other party was an excellent intelligence officer, shouldn't he clean the place and deal with the maggot-infested pork at the same time? Luo Guang and Jessica also saw these situations and were also confused. The other party didn't seem to be taking good care of the store now. Wasn't he afraid that others would become suspicious? Shiva is young and has the least experience in training and actual combat among the team. Naturally, she also saw these problems, but she was only slightly confused for a while. She believed in Leonard and quickly found a reason for him. For example, the other party has just taken over the store and hasn't had time to deal with the mess left by the previous one. Or it's just a temporary stronghold that will be abandoned in a few days, so there is no cleaning, etc. Leonard stood at the door, looked around, nodded to a beggar on the ground not far away, and then entered the house and closed the door. Shiva got straight to the point and asked directly about the mission information. Bread tree, have you collected any information in the past few days? Breadfruit is Leonard's codename because the opponent's figure is relatively wide and looks as strong as a breadfruit tree. Leonard looked embarrassed and shook his head. I haven't been here for 2 days. You can see that the store is not ready yet. How can I have time to inquire about information? What he said was also explaining why the situation here was a mess, and it didn't look like a businessman at all. Shiva continued to ask, don't you have any information? Leonard's expression changed and he smiled proudly. I'm not one of those second-rate intelligence agents. Although I don't have time, I have a lot of time with my familiar informants, and they got an important piece of information. When Shiva heard this, she quickly asked, what information? Every Saturday night, Erwin would go back to the Z mansion in the town to live a comfortable life. Many girls in the town suffered while saying these words. Leonard shook his head. Although it is called a building, it is actually a 3-story villa. That's today. Shiva looked at her watch and said in surprise, it's better to come early than to come by chance. I will immediately arrange manpower to prepare for a direct raid there. There's no rush. The exact time the other party will arrive is uncertain, and according to the informant, Erwin sometimes won't come when he's busy. So you'd better wait for me to confirm that the other party is here and don't act too hastily. He thought for a moment and then asked, by the way, how many soldiers have you prepared? That person has a lot of bodyguards. It is said that even if he is doing those casual things, he still needs bodyguards to protect him on sight. Jessica thought that guy was a little disgusting, and she was glad that she didn't have to cooperate with such a disgusting person. As for the 3 people she is working with now, she is most interested in Luo Guang. In addition to the temperament that attracts the attention of the opposite sex, the other person's personality is also her favorite type. Her personality seems to be relatively easygoing, which is more suitable for the strong woman to take control in her hands and lead it as she pleases. As for how many soldiers to prepare, only Shiva knew. She replied, 4 combat teams. What do the people in this town think of Erwin? Will it affect our actions? This is a problem because people here have little contact with the outside world, so they basically don't know what BSAA is. Leonard showed a troubled expression and said, but I think the people here will not stand up for Erwin. You should only have to face the town guard and the bodyguards brought by Erwin himself. Shiva asked conservatively, then I will send 4 more teams. Leonard thought for a moment and said, well, that's enough. Shiva checked the time and saw that it was almost night, so she sent a message to her men to prepare. After she made the arrangements, she asked, then shall we wait here? This is to ask everyone present to see if they have any other opinions. Jessica said, anyway, there is nothing to do when we go out, so we might as well stay here. It's almost night anyway, so we don't want to get into trouble. Luo Guang and Hank didn't care, so Leonard led the 4 of them into the lounge behind the store. In fact, there is a basement here, but Luo Guang felt that there was no escape door in that place, and he would not be able to escape in an accident, so he rejected the other party's suggestion. Leonard didn't pay attention. He answered the phone and then said to Shiva, my informant has new information, maybe about Erwin. I'll go get it. Wait a minute, I have a question. Although Cwa said before that she would be responsible for communication, Luo Guang still felt that he should ask clearly. He used the tribal language he learned temporarily, and his teacher was the super artificial intelligence Red Emperor. Leonard raised his eyebrows and said, you ask. Didn't Erwin spread the Plaka parasite in this place? If so, the enemy we faced might be the entire town. Luo Guang asked the question. Leonard thought for a while and said, I didn't find any problems when I came here. After asking about things to pay attention to when opening a store, everyone basically told me to be careful about Erwin and to pay tribute on a regular basis. Luo Guang's expression did not change and he said, I know, but you still have to be careful. The enemy may be so crazy that he infects everyone. Shiva nodded, stood up from the chair, and said, how about I go with you? I'll also have someone to take care of you. Luo Guang was about to speak when he heard Leonard reply, no, it's safer and more private for me to be alone. Shiva didn't insist and sat back. The other party also locked the door after leaving, trapping them here. Luo Guang ordered to Hank, Hank, go check the terrain here and confirm if there are other exits. Yes, Hank didn't ask any further questions. His boss told him to follow Luo Guang's orders when he arranged for him to perform this task. Jessica looked at Hank who was leaving and asked curiously, what's wrong? Do you think there's something wrong with the bread tree? When she mentioned the word baobab tree, she smiled in all her beauty, very charmingly, without any awareness of the approaching threat. Shiva, who originally planned to take this time to clean the shop for Leonard, also stopped and pricked up her ears. Do you think it's okay? Luo Guang asked the other party. Jessica thought to herself that this was a small way to pick up girls and attract women's attention, and said, I think it's okay. Men like women who are a little bit stupider than themselves. Luo Guang was just about to tell the other party to work hard and stop pretending to be stupid, when he suddenly noticed a slight movement not far away. He turned to look at the maggot-infested hanging pig, and at the same time he had a flying knife in his hand, which was originally prepared for Leonard. Jessica's heart tightened. She didn't notice the other party's action of drawing a weapon at all. Shiva also noticed Luo Guang's gaze, and the pig was right behind her. Before she could ask a question, a cold light passed in front of her eyes, inserted into the pig, and flew into it. Luo Guang controlled his strength a little, otherwise he would have shot right through. Leonard has a big problem after throwing the throwing knife, he answered the two people's doubts. He went over and took out the straight knife and cut the pig open in twos and twos. What fell out of it was a mature Plaka parasite, and Luo Guang's flying knife pierced directly into its weakness. Meow, the Remington M8700 MCS shotgun seems to be a future weapon in this book. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 457. This. Shiva was stunned. If she hadn't stopped to listen to the conversation between the two, she might have been attacked by the parasites while cleaning the pig. Diamond suit, diamond suit. Luo Guang turned back to look at Jessica. Okay, you are right. I will follow your command. Jessica raised her hands in surrender, knowing who to rely on for this mission. Shiva looked at Luo Guang who was cleaning the flying knife and asked, how do you know there are parasites in the pig? She didn't see Luo Guang take out the scanner or do anything. If he just heard the movement, he shouldn't have hit the enemy's weakness with one shot. Shiva, you forgot one thing after you just exchanged the secret code, that is, use the scanner to check the situation of Leonard. Luo Guang's previous doubts about the environmental problems here made him use the electromagnetic field to confirm the situation of Leonard and the surrounding environment, and then he found the Plaka parasite in the pig. Leonard also had parasites in his body. Luo Guang didn't say it because of the other party's identity. Even if he knew that the other party had been parasitized, others might not believe it, and finally fell into a dispute. Anyway, the Red Emperor had already informed him that the townspeople began to gather and surround them after they entered the pork shop, so there was no need for such an enemy. Are you saying that Leonard has a problem? Shiva recalled the matter of the Plaka parasite, and frustration and sadness appeared on her delicate face, saying, indeed, I should check it. The parasites are lurking in the store. Who would believe that Leonard is fine? This is not a problem, Luo Guang said. What I am worried about now is that all the residents of this town have been parasitized by parasites. Anyone who is not parasitized will be discovered, which means that we are exposed the moment we enter the town. Jessica hurriedly said, then let's leave quickly. Too late. Hank came back and answered the other party's question. In order to facilitate contact, Luo Guang told the other party that he could use mental power to transmit sound, saying that this is the same ability as Wusong. So Hank knew exactly what had just happened, including the fact that he and his men had been surrounded. He told Luo Guang what he had seen during the inspection. Just as you guessed, the town has been surrounded by the townspeople. They should all be parasitized. Jessica followed Hank to the back of the pork shop and saw people coming and going through the small window. Isn't this a normal flow of people? Jessica didn't see the problem, but felt that the town was very prosperous. She understood that the town looked dilapidated and didn't look like it was economically prosperous, and the public security wouldn't be much better, so there wouldn't be so many people wandering around outside after nightfall. Hank said, we haven't seen so many people on the road before, and if you look closely, you can see that these people outside are carrying weapons. In fact, those people didn't hide it. They were carrying all kinds of tribal weapons full of African style or tools such as wrenches and hammers. He also took out his own pad machine to show the situation seen by the monitoring satellite. The front and back doors of the small pork shop were surrounded by the townspeople, and the townspeople who were coming and going were actually walking back and forth on the small path. Luo Guang and Shiva came to the front door, looked through the vent above the door, and saw Leonard talking to one of them in tribal language. Bread tree. Seeing this, Shiva could only abandon all illusions and said, we have fallen into the enemy's trap. The two retreated, locked the door from the inside, blocked the door with a table, and then met up with Hank and the others. After listening to Luo Guang's report, Jessica immediately said, there are people in front and behind, what should we do? Break out of the siege, it's that simple, Luo Guang said to Shiva, send the support of BSAA, and we will evacuate from the air. Shiva was unwilling to retreat like this, and said, is there no other way to find Irwin? Yes, go to the town building and bet that the other party is still there or left clues. Hank expressed his thoughts, it just so happens that there is a helicopter retreat there. He is the kind of person who will use all means to complete the mission and will not give up easily. Suddenly, the iron block fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Luo Guang and Hank only took out the pistol, but did not take out the shotgun, and Shiva and Jessica also took out their weapons because of their actions. There should be an enemy in the vent, or a parasite came in. Luo Guang's speculation was recognized by others. The iron gate was suddenly knocked, and Leonard's voice came, hey, why did you lock the door? It's me, I have good news. It's obvious that the parasites have been hiding in various places in the front room, waiting for them to pass by and then catch them all. As an intelligence officer, the other party's shouting is really inappropriate, as if telling others that he is not an ordinary pork seller, which once again verifies Luo Guang's previous judgment. It's not that the person behind the scenes who controls Leonard doesn't know this, but that person has made all the preparations. The next step is to catch the turtle in the jar and ask Excella for credit. Luo Guang and others did not respond, which was also within his expectations, because he found that the parasite used for insurance in the pork shop had been eliminated. But this did not prevent him from feeling that he had already won. He didn't care if the other party didn't come out. He controlled his subordinates to carry a wireless broadcaster to the door of the pork shop. He picked up the microphone in his hand and said, good evening to all of you guys who showed up uninvited. The sun had set unknowingly, and as Irwin's voice came from the announcer, the townspeople struck flints, lit torches, and lit up the area around the pork shop. There was still no sound inside, but it wasn't a big deal to Irwin, thinking that those poor souls might be hiding inside and shivering. Thinking about how scared Axela's enemies were now, Erwin became more and more excited. I will give you a way to survive. Come out and surrender. This way of survival is the same as Leonard's, it is the road controlled by the Plaka parasite. At this moment, he was imagining how satisfying it would be to kick the enemy into the abyss when the enemy thought he had hope of survival. However, Luo Guang and others still ignored each other. Except for the crackling sound of the torch, there was no other sound. This made the arrogant Erwin feel that he was ignored, and dissatisfaction and anger flooded his brain. He put the microphone in front of his mouth and shouted, "You damn guys! You actually ignored the great Erwin, Ike Miss Sarah's future husband." This future husband was Erwin's boastful word, and he didn't dare to say such arrogant words in front of Axela. Although the above told him to drag the enemies, they didn't tell him how to drag them. Then he killed all the enemies who came to him. This was also a way to attract B.S.A.'s attention and buy time for Axela. Axela was able to know that Luo Guang and the others came to investigate because of the information leaked after Leonard was parasitized. Luo Guang and the others still didn't reply, as if they didn't bother to communicate with Erwin. Since the enemy had this attitude, Erwin didn't say any more nonsense and directly ordered the controlled townspeople, the parasites that Axela called Makanai, to launch an attack. In Swahili, this Makanai means evil spirit. After receiving the order, a group of Makanai immediately picked up the guys, and some of them still had guns and cannons in their hands. A giant Makanai, who was more than 2 meters tall, ran up and knocked open the iron door of the pork shop. The other Makanai immediately charged in. Not only that, the enemies at the back door also started to take action, breaking open the back door and filing in. However, no trace of BSAA and others was found on either side, only a few Plaka parasites that entered the ambush in advance were seen. "Sir, we found no trace of the enemy, but we found a big hole in the wall." Leonard entered and quickly discovered the escape route of Luo Guang and the others. Yes, Luo Guang used his invisible straight knife to cut through the wall, then carefully moved it away, and finally left the pork shop quietly. Erwin was also inexperienced and thought that just blocking the front and back doors of the pork shop would be enough. When Luo Guang cut the wall, if there was no reaction from the other side of the wall, he knew that the other side was not guarding this place. After they left, they headed all the way to the town building as planned, and at the same time asked Shiva to contact people from BSAA to come over and pick them up. Unknowingly, Luo Guang was already exercising the command of the temporary team. When everyone heard the loud noise coming from behind, they knew that the other party had launched an attack. They quickened their pace, left the house, walked in the alley and ran towards the town building. Erwin did not call the whole town to surround the BSAA people, so soon Majani discovered Luo Guang and the others, and then reported the information to Erwin via radio. Immediately afterwards, they picked up their handymen and attacked Luo Guang and the others. Damn it, Jessica ran away and used her TMP submachine gun to block the enemy. The marksmanship seems to be pretty good. The precise control of the fully automatic mode produces a 3-shot burst effect, knocking down enemies who are relatively close to both sides. But when she was at FBC, her main job was to go to various places to collect intelligence or sit in the office and have afternoon tea. Regular antibiochemical tasks do not require her to go to the front line. These are skills learned from people. Holding a straight knife in one hand and an R-9 pistol in the other, Luo Guang walked at the front to clear the way and eliminate all enemies blocking the road. Compared with the villagers of the Illuminati sect, these Makanai have higher intelligence, but their relative combat effectiveness has not improved much. They can only wield weapons to attack with strength far beyond ordinary people. Shiva suddenly stopped and dodged the flying axe, then raised her hand and knocked down the enemies surrounding the throwing axe. Hank was walking at the back. He reacted quickly and did not hit Shiva. He took this opportunity to turn around and shoot down several Makanai. His shoulder was suddenly tapped by Shiva, which was a signal from the other party that she could move on. Hank threw a grenade to stop the enemy, then turned to follow, and together with Shiva, he caught up with the two people who didn't stop. Erwin is indeed in the town building at this time. He has actually been waiting here recently for BSAA to send someone to die. Hearing that the BSAA soldiers were coming towards him, he arrogantly ran to the garage without saying anything. At the same time, he asked the town's militia to stop the enemy, and the bodyguards naturally followed him in retreat. Luo Guang and the others have arrived less than 500 meters away from the town building. Damn it, can't we stop this? Erwin cursed inwardly after receiving the latest intelligence, and sat in the back seat of the luxury car, shouting, "Drive quickly, go home." He cherished his life, but he did not forget Excella's mission. He made a mess of the mayor's office, and at the same time left a clue for the enemy to continue chasing him. The town militia, holding the Wanguo brand weapons, ran towards Luo Guang and his men aggressively. The sound of da-da-da rang out, and the enemy held the gun, without aiming, and fired directly. Luo Guang hid directly to the right, and Jessica also reacted quickly and followed. Hank and Shiva could only hide in the alley on the left because of the terrain. "Hank, gather at the town building," Luo Guang shouted, and at the same time replaced a new magazine for the R-9 pistol. "Got it," Hank's voice came. Luo Guang said to Jessica, "Let's go." Jessica followed, already slightly panting, and was in no mood to reply. The mechanists in the town were surrounding them, so they couldn't stop at all, and there was no time for the two sides to meet. After Hank replaced the pistol bullets, he put the pistol back into the quick-draw holster, and then took out the shotgun. "Follow me," Hank, who was responsible for the rear guard, said to Shiva, "just cover my back." Although they only fought together for a while, Shiva could still see that Hank's combat effectiveness was higher than hers, so she didn't say much. Hank kicked open the back door of a house in the alley, and then shot the enemy who was slashing with a knife in the head. He continued to move forward and knocked the wall open. According to Luo Guang's investigation, this town is not a wealthy place. The only houses made of reinforced concrete are the villas near the town building. The others are basically mud houses or iron houses, otherwise he would not dare to hit the wall rashly. Shiva had no time to sigh at the opponent's strong power. He turned around and fired 2 shots to knock down the enemy who came in from the back door. The back door was not big, and the guy who fell down could just delay the enemy behind. It was for this reason that the enemy had been unable to catch up with them before. Shiva thanked GIMZ for the information about the weakness of the Plaka parasite host, otherwise she would not be able to stop the enemy. It didn't take long to delay the enemy temporarily, and she immediately turned around to chase Hank. Hank slowed down a little and confirmed that Shiva was following him before he continued to hit the wall to make a way. The giant Makanai who appeared before crashed in from the other wall. The sudden enemy made Shiva react a beat slower, and the enemy's fist swung at her head, which kept expanding in her pupils. Go. Meow. Thank you for subscribing and monthly tickets. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 458. Accompanied by the steady voice of the middle-aged man, the giant Makanai in front of Shiva was knocked away by Hank, and then shot in the head. Hank naturally knew the location of the parasite, but the giant Makanai in front of him had much more muscle and fat than normal humans, and the 12-gauge shotgun bullet might not be able to penetrate the defense and eliminate the parasite in the enemy's body. It would be better to deprive the enemy of his observation ability first, so that he could hinder the siege of other enemies in the chaos. Shiva reacted and ran into the hole in the wall that Hank had knocked open while shooting at the incoming enemies. The parasite in the giant Makanai's body may have felt that the head was useless, so it burst directly from the neck and swept the surrounding enemies. After Hank squatted down to avoid the attack, he immediately turned around and followed into the next room. He turned back to save Shiva after hearing the loud noise. In comparison, the situation on Luo Guang's side was not too good. The militia Makanai with a gun set his sights on them. Luo Guang also hit the wall everywhere like Hank, all the way to the town building. The walls of the building could hide their position, but the militia Makanai opened fire directly into the house, and the bullets fired by various imitation acts could easily penetrate the walls. "Take care of yourself," Luo Guang said casually. Anyway, Jessica was a spy arranged by Sanli and company to FBC, so he was too lazy to protect her. "Can't you be gentle with a woman?" Jessica lay on the ground to avoid the bullets and cursed. Her beauty that was always invincible was ineffective on the other party. The enemy did not know to coordinate the staggered reloading to avoid the fire window period, so all the Makanai emptied their weapons at almost the same time. Luo Guang immediately seized the opportunity and flew out of the iron shed directly. He held the R-9 pistol in his right hand and quickly emptied the magazine, shooting one enemy at a time, leaving only one bullet in the gun chamber. Then he pressed the unload button and threw the magazine out with a flick of his hand. The 3 throwing knives held between his left fingers were also thrown to the other side when he flew out of the house. He dealt with 3 enemies, and then immediately took out a new magazine and inserted it into the pistol. There were still many militia Makanists, and they would continue to attack after changing the bullets. But Luo Guang was faster than them in the whole set of actions, and he fired first, and finally dealt with this group of enemies with guns. There was a loud noise in the house where Jessica was, followed by a crackling sound of gunfire. Luo Guang turned his head and saw Jessica running out of the house, shouting, "Help!" A giant Makanai holding an execution axe in both hands seemed to be summoned by her crow's mouth, ignoring the open door and directly knocking through the wall. Putting away the R-9 pistol, Luo Guang took out the shotgun, pulled the holster and fired 3 shots in a row. Unlike Hank, his gun was loaded with single-headed bullets, so even if this giant Makanai had stronger defense than other ordinary Makanists, it was still a flesh and blood body and could not stop the single-headed bullet at all. In Jessica's surprised eyes, the big guy just fell to the ground without causing any trouble to Luo Guang. She reacted and saw that he was about to say something, such as a few words of praise, and then hug his thigh. However, Luo Guang turned around coldly and continued to head towards the town building, making her swallow her words and immediately follow him. "Hank," Luo Guang saw 2 people running out of the alley on the other side. "We're fine," Hank replied, and the 2 sides regrouped. Jessica saw that there were 2 more people who could serve as meat shields, and she was secretly happy in her heart. She breathed a sigh of relief and asked Shiva, "When will our support arrive?" Not so fast. Shiva knew that time was running out, but it would take at least half an hour. If she had known that she would encounter this situation, she should have agreed to Luo Guang and the others to bring light machine guns. With the joint efforts of Luo Guang and Hank, the defense line established by the militia Makanai in front of the town building was broken through by them without any danger. Everyone entered the town building and relied on the internal environment to deal with the enemy. Hank shot and killed 2 enemies who were chasing up the stairs, and said his doubts, the number of enemies seems to have decreased. There were not many enemies attacking at the same time, so they were much easier to deal with. "But I have used up more than half of my bullets. Jessica may have less than 100 bullets in total." Shiva also said, "Me too." According to her plan, there would not be such a big battle in this mission, so she did not carry a lot of ammunition. "I still have more than half." "Me too." Luo Guang and Hank knew that the battle might take a long time, so they used bullets sparingly. Some enemies who did not have guns were dealt with by them with straight knives and daggers. Although Jessica and Shiva consumed more bullets, the number of kills was overwhelmingly more than Luo Guang and Hank. Taking advantage of the opportunity before the enemy came up, CWA planned to discuss the next plan. "We will split into 2 groups. Jessica and I will go to find Erwin, and you will temporarily help us block the enemy. There is only one big staircase from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor of this building, so Luo Guang and his 2 men can stop the enemy. Erwin escaped 5 minutes ago. Let's go directly to his office to see if there are any clues." Luo Guang received a notice from the Red Emperor halfway through. The former satellite of Umbrella Corporation has been hanging above their heads to monitor the situation since the beginning of the mission. As for how to confirm that Erwin has escaped, it is because there are not many people driving luxury cars in Africa, and according to BSAA intelligence, Erwin has a Rolls-Royce luxury car. Then, isn't it only Erwin who escaped from the parasite zombies in a luxury car? What? CWA complained, why didn't you tell us earlier? Maybe we could stop them and take Erwin as a hostage. Luo Guangxiu narrowed his eyes and interrupted, the ones who opened the way and the ones who cut off the rear were all from GIMZ. How could we tell you when we were surrounded? Some people drove away and we couldn't catch up. It's better to stay here and wait for support. CWA was thinking about how to catch people, so he didn't refute and proposed another plan. Okay. But the BSAA team's helicopter has already set off, so we can let them intercept them? No. Since GIMZ knows that Erwin ran away, they should be able to track him all the time, right? We should play the long game and catch the big fish, and find the enemy's base camp, otherwise the factory can continue to produce biological weapons by changing its leader, and the problem cannot be completely solved. Jessica didn't want to stay in this ghost place for a long time, so she didn't want the helicopter to perform other tasks, and her mission didn't include disrupting the trade in biological weapons. She looked at Luo Guang and confirmed her guess, how long can your tracking method track? Luo Guang covered Hank while he was changing bullets, knocked down 2 enemies, and said, satellite tracking, so arresting Erwin is not something to worry about now. You might as well take the opportunity to go to the office to see if you can collect some evidence and clues. After that, we will hold on to the rooftop and wait for support. In fact, regarding the arrest of Erwin, he felt that the other party would definitely not surrender, so if they really met the other party, they would not say any nonsense about arresting. The right thing to do was to shoot the other party directly. The African branch of BSAA obviously did not attach enough importance to this mission, or to the parasites, and was still following the process of biochemical viruses. Luo Guang was now collecting intelligence by virtue of the commission of BSAA, and by the way, he would see if he could follow the clues to find the secret research institute where Wesker and others were, so he agreed with Jessica's fishing plan. Seeing this, Shiva did not insist anymore, and turned around and went to find Erwin's office with Jessica. Watching the two leave, Hank said to Luo Guang, we haven't had a match for a long time, right? Luo Guang nodded and accepted the challenge after hearing Hank's words. He drew out his straight knife, while Hank took out his dagger. Facing those enemies holding farm tools or hardware products as weapons, there was no need to use guns at all, that was just for Shiva to see. As for those militia Makanai holding guns, they had all died in the first batch of enemies, and they hadn't seen any other Makanai pick up guns to use. Although Hank had become much stronger, he had also been trained by Wusong, and he knew that a big tree attracts the wind, and a single tree can't support itself, so he would not easily reveal his true strength in front of outsiders. Luo Guang swept across with a knife, easily cutting off all the enemies in front of him, and the emphasis was on one force defeating 10 skills. And Hank fought with the enemy in close combat, and then used the short and powerful characteristics of the dagger in his hand to deal with the parasites in the enemy's body, and at the same time used his body skills to use the dead enemy as a shield. With the cover of the meat shield, he only had to face one enemy at a time. The two of them released their fighting power and counterattacked all the way to the first floor lobby. There were more enemies here, but Luo Guang found that many of them stood still and did not charge towards the stairs. The enemies were all parasitized by parasites. Under normal circumstances, they should not be afraid of fighting and death, and they would not rest because of fatigue. In other words, the enemy received orders from the upper-level parasites and then launched attacks in batches, which was obviously not in line with common sense. Erwin had no combat experience, but generally arrogant guys would choose to send everyone to rush forward and use human C tactics to solve the enemy. Just as Luo Guan was dealing with the enemy and thinking about the problem, Shiva's voice sounded in the headset, "We found the office and we are searching for things inside." Received. Luo Guan killed another Makanai. One of the enemies took out his mobile phone and was knocked down by Hank, who was quick-eyed and quick-handed. He didn't know who the other party was going to call, but he was right to stop the enemy from doing what he wanted to do. Although Erwin did not receive the notification, he also realized that the parasites he sensed were dying a little too fast, so he readjusted the intensity of the attack and sent more mechanists to attack BSAA and others at the same time. Unexpectedly, after changing from 2 to 4, the parasites died faster. Damn it! Erwin immediately ordered to double the number, but the feedback he got was still that the parasites died faster. Unknown fear emerged from his heart, so he controlled a Makanai who was farther away to observe the situation, and then reported the situation to him by mobile phone. After understanding the situation, he asked his men to stay away from the town building first, and then called Excella to report the situation. "The enemy looks a bit fierce, do you still want to continue the plan to delay time?" Excella showed an unhappy expression on her face. She only felt disgusted with Erwin, a man who had improper thoughts about her. If this guy was not easier to control, she would have changed him long ago. But she didn't expect that the other party couldn't even do such a small thing and bothered her. "Erwin." Ixala still maintained the tone of the queen, saying, "You don't need to face those enemies in person, what are you afraid of?" When she heard the other party's words, she knew that the other party was just afraid of death. But the support of BSAA will arrive soon, and then our men will suffer heavy losses. To be precise, Erwin was distressed that the number of parasites under his control had been greatly reduced. Ixala commented on the short-sighted man in her heart, and then said, "It doesn't matter, I will make up for it later. As for the problem of the helicopter, you should have a group of mercenaries under your command, right? They are on standby at the next location. Then don't waste it, stay in the base camp and teach BSAA a lesson." "Can I eliminate them all?" Erwin was overjoyed. "Yes. But don't forget my plan." Ixala wanted the other party not to solve all the enemies at once. "Yes." Erwin was not satisfied with this, but he felt much better when he thought that the other party had entrusted such an important matter to him. In Erwin's town building office, after Shiva cleaned up the cameras in the room, she began to look for information on the desktop, while Jessica directly cracked the computer to search for useful things. This file. Shiva found a file from a pile of garbage with the word report written on it. She picked it up and opened it to check, and found that there was a lot of information in it. Kazuzu area. Shiva had an impression of this place. There has been a long-term civil war there, and people live in poverty. They basically rely on the local mining area to maintain the economy. It is indeed very suitable for the enemy to use the Plaka parasite to control. And she remembered that the civil war there recently ended and the temporary Z government was established. Could this matter also be related to Erwin? Shiva took out the pad machine in her backpack and searched the map to confirm the location of the Kazuzu area, which was 30 kilometers away from this town. She continued to search for the latest information in the area and found that the temporary Z government sent troops to block the area the day before yesterday, shortly after Leonard entered the town, and issued a notice at the same time. Just like a trap, they allow outsiders to enter, but do not allow anyone to leave. The specific content of the report in hand is what Elvin did in this place, how many people he controlled, how much supplies he prepared, how many biological and chemical weapons he produced, etc. It can be said that this document is a collection of Elvin's crimes. "I found a clue," Shiva shouted to her companion, "what about you?" After watching the progress bar reach 100%, Jessica pretended to be disappointed and said, "I can't find any useful information." As she said, she pulled out the USB drive under the table. It doesn't matter, the other party's action was in Shiva's blind spot. She said, my report mentioned the location of Elvin's base camp. Next, we just need to raid there and catch the culprit. Then there is no time to lose, let's retreat quickly, Jessica nodded. Shiva looked at the time and said, okay, the helicopter is coming soon, we are almost ready. After that, she contacted Luo Guang and the others by radio and asked them to meet on the rooftop, and she would go first. Luo Guang looked at the enemies retreating and hiding in the surrounding houses and replied, received, but the enemy just suddenly stopped attacking. Jessica and Shiva were very surprised to hear this answer, and said at the same time, what's going on? Meow, thank you for subscribing and voting meow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tong Miao. Chapter 459. Hank saw an enemy using a cell phone to make a call before. Perhaps Erwin, who was controlling the enemy from a distance, felt that the loss was too great, so he took the initiative to retreat. Luo Guang made his own guess. In common sense, parasite soldiers are not valuable, but their number is still limited at present, so in order to preserve their strength, the enemy will temporarily avoid the edge. Cwa didn't think so, and said, we just got the information here, and the enemy retreated. Is this really a coincidence? Jessica thought about her computer operation and worried that the enemy might find out that she copied the computer data. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Hank thought for a while and said, what is your information? By the way, find out if there are any listening devices or cameras. Cwa briefly explained the content and said that she blew up the cameras when she entered the door. Luo Guang said, such important information was actually pulled down? And normally, in order to prevent the information from being leaked, Erwin would have increased the intensity of the attack if he knew that you had found a leak through some means. Jessica, who knew where to put the bug, quickly found the bug under the table and said, I found it. From this point, it can be confirmed that Erwin also knew that they had found valuable information, so the meaning of the other party suddenly giving up the attack is worth pondering. Luo Guang looked at the corpses piled up at the door and made a gesture to Hank to retreat upwards. Hank wiped the brass knuckles on his hands and nodded, then he changed to a shotgun and continued to cover Luo Guang. There is a guess that this information was deliberately left to us, so we need to survive and send the information out. Jessica asked, but why? What's the benefit to Erwin? She felt that there was information that her employer wanted to know. Maybe it is beneficial to Sanli and Company. Don't forget the relationship between this guy and Sanli and Company. Luo Guang felt that he had caught Wesker's tail. Although the plot of the game of Resident Evil 5 will definitely change greatly, he does not think that Wesker will change his grand plan to rule the world. However, for the time being, he only told Jill his guess to see if the other party could find new clues from the biochemical crisis incident at the headquarters of Tri-Union Corporation. As they talked, they met on the rooftop. The helicopter also sent a contact, so they could only put their doubts aside for the time being. This is Raider number 3. Be careful of the enemy's anti-aircraft firepower. Luo Guang connected to the communication channel of the helicopter and warned. Although the mechanists stopped attacking, they were still hiding in the bungalows outside the building. However, those ordinary mechanists who picked up various guns and rocket launchers did not make a move in the end, and watched Luo Guang and others leave. Erwin closed his laptop and shouted to the driver, drive faster. Although Shiva smashed the camera in his office, the monitoring equipment still confirmed that the other party had found the specially prepared document. In this case, there was no need for him to waste his men's lives. Even if Excella said that he would give him a supplement, he immediately asked his men to stop the attack. The monitor heard that the people on the BSAA side had doubts about his operation, but based on his understanding of these followers, the other party would definitely not give up this rare clue easily. Even if they knew it was a trap, they would rush into it. So he did not give the Makanai an order to lead the attack again. Luo Guang and his team did not return to the headquarters, but went directly to the BSAA base closest to the Kazuzu area. The first thing he and Shiva did when they returned to the base was to contact McGuan and O'Brien, the heads of the African branch. And Hank and Jessica went to prepare weapons and equipment for the next operation, but there was no time for them to rest. From the satellite tracking, Alvin did reach the Kazuzu area and then entered an ore processing plant. Luo Guang told the intelligence on his side. McGuan thought for a while and said, "But a temporary government has been established there. If we rush in, we will cause trouble. No country in the world has recognized the legitimacy of this regime. Don't forget that our BSAA is backed by the United Nations." Luo Guang was a little unhappy with the director of the African branch. The incident in the town has already shown the harmfulness of the Plaka parasite, but the other party is still indecisive and considers this and that. Compared with pure people like Jill and Chris, this guy is a pure politician. Of course, it doesn't mean that politicians are bad. As an international organization, BSAA has many inconveniences in taking action. Politicians can play a role in coordinating relations between all parties. He just thinks that this biochemical crisis deserves more attention. Shiva agreed with Luo Guang and said, "That's right. Do extraordinary things in extraordinary times. We must immediately solve the problems in the Kazuzu area, otherwise it will be troublesome if those parasites spread. Information spreads slowly in Africa, and many places are relatively backward, and the roads are not easy to travel. If things spread, by the time the BSAA receives the intelligence, it may be out of control. Some people may question why the spread is so fast when the transportation facilities are so poor. This is naturally because the spread can be accelerated artificially. So Shiva, Luo Guang, and other people who have seen the situation in the town will stand together, hoping to take action immediately in the Kazuzu area and strangle the crisis in that area." The African minister thought for a moment and said, "Otherwise, I will leave the matter of capturing Irwin to GIMZ, and we will help seal off the area from the outside. As soon as it is confirmed that the people there are infected by parasites, we will report it immediately. United Nations, send troops to defeat the enemy." In fact, what the African minister meant was that he did not want to risk taking responsibility. At the same time, he was secretly giving GIMZ a little lesson. The previous great work of reporting to the headquarters to prevent parasites was actually reported to O'Brien directly by the other party, which made him miss one of the great achievements, so now he is deliberately making things difficult for the other party. In his opinion, only people from his own branch can solve this biological crisis incident, and the other party will not be stupid enough to use a small mercenary group to deal with people in an area. Therefore, the other party should reject him. In that case, he would not only lose the opponent's face, but it would not be considered as framing a friendly force. "Then Minister, please issue a letter of authorization in the name of BSAA." But Luo Guang didn't think it mattered, and he didn't notice the other party's inner thoughts, because this gray area itself was the stage for mercenaries to appear. "What?" Luo Guang saw the surprised expression on the head of the African branch and asked curiously, "Is there any problem with this?" BSAA Africa minister's mind started to spin rapidly and he said, "There are quite a lot of enemies, and they are very likely to face people from the entire Kazuzu region. Do you, GIMZ, have enough manpower?" Knowing that the entire area is likely to experience a biological crisis and that a large number of humans are infected by parasites, Minister Ma Guowan still has the time to worry about the shortage of manpower in our GIMZ troops. It's really touching. There was no trace of emotion in Luo Guang's words, only mockery of Ma Guowan. Resisting biohazard is not as simple as you think, soldier. If it were that simple, our BSAA wouldn't have to go through the trouble of applying for law enforcement rights from various countries in the first place. Minister Magwan immediately retorted that he could not be looked down upon by a mercenary. Luo Guang sighed and asked, "Minister, when are you going to start solving this biological crisis? This crisis is not as simple as you think. I want to know too." The screen suddenly split into two, and O'Brien's figure also appeared. "Commander. Why are you here?" Magwan looked surprised. "Oh? Didn't you notice that I was always there? It was just because I had something to do, so I didn't speak or turn on the camera." "Eh? I didn't say that this matter was very urgent and needed the commander's help, so did I also bring him in?" Luo Guang also looked strange. Magwan was not familiar with computers, and the column for members in video conferences was too obstructive, so he often reduced the column for members. He suddenly didn't know what to say. He was cursing Luo Guang in his heart for not practicing martial ethics and even dragging the commander in without saying hello. O'Brien said, "Magwan, you have a good intention in this matter. The Jizuzu area itself is prone to wars, and the surrounding forces are also ready to attack the area. We, BSAA, should treat it with caution to avoid causing international disputes." Ma Guan felt relieved, but soon he became nervous again as if his heart was being grabbed by the other party. "However, you have not considered that the purpose of our BSAA is not to balance the forces of all parties, but to solve biochemical problems." In fact, O'Brien is also dissatisfied with Ma Guan's conservative strategy, but sitting in his position, he has to worry about the other party's face to prevent the other party from deliberately holding back in the future. He is very aware of the limitlessness of politicians. Magwan is still explaining his actions, but not considering these will have an impact on our B.S.A.'s reputation and so on. What's the impact? Are we going to occupy that area? I'm worried that the surrounding forces will take advantage of the situation and disrupt the blockade, which will also affect Irwin's capture mission. So I must first communicate with the surrounding forces and seal off the area together. Magwan also thought about solving problems from his own perspective. At first, he just wanted to teach GIMZ a lesson. It's just that most of the biological crises that occurred on the African continent were solved by the local GIMZ force, and he was responsible for solving some easy incidents. This caused him to misunderstand the difficulty of countering the biochemical crisis, the strength of his own branch, and even the strength of GIMZ, and finally misjudged the crisis. Ma Guan continued to explain why he thought he should coordinate all parties first. Irwin has already entered this area. As long as it is sealed off, the other party will be unable to fly. There is no rush. With a hint of fatigue on his face, O'Brien replied, "You are wrong. This matter is very urgent. I need you to solve this biological crisis as soon as possible and find a way to confirm the enemy's entire plan. The situation in Europe is not good." Jill was very busy, and Luo Guang was also busy dealing with matters here. The two sides did not have time to exchange information in detail, but judging from O'Brien's face, it was obvious that the situation was not good. O'Brien replied, "It's very bad. Tens of thousands of people in the entire city are infected with the Plaka parasite, and they don't know where they got the guns and weapons, making it very difficult to clean up. FBC and NATO troops also entered the scene to perform tasks, but the infected and survivors were mixed together, making rescue more difficult." Luo Guang felt that there must be more than these problems, and said, "If this is the case, it is not particularly bad compared to the previous biochemical crisis. You are not so tired, right?" While Ma Guan was thinking about what O'Brien had just said to him, he also pricked up his ears to listen to the conversation between the two. His first impression was that the two were familiar, and he only thought about things in Europe later. Luo Guang thought of Wesker's big plan and guessed, "Is there a biohazard incident happening elsewhere?" "Yes, there are a lot of them and they are all related to the Plaka parasite, but we still have no clue about the conspiracy behind it. That's why O'Brien asked Ma Go-wan to resolve the incident in Africa as soon as possible. Apart from Europe, this Plaka parasite is the only one found in Africa. He intuitively felt that events in Africa might be the key to breaking the situation. Luo Guang said, "GIMZ mentioned before that this Plaka parasite might be the work of Sanli and company, right?" Ma Go-wan finally found a place where he could interrupt and said, "Wait a minute, we have investigated this matter. Irwin, who sells biological and chemical weapons such as Plaka parasites, has nothing to do with Sanli and company." O'Brien also asked, "I know this, but the problem is that the person who informed us of the biological crisis was also someone from Sanli and company. Maybe there is an internal problem and internal strife." Luo Guang thought of Wesker. That guy would definitely not rely on others, and maybe he was trying to occupy the magpie's nest again. Is there any evidence? Guan is the only one who would ask this now, because if there is evidence, neither Luo Guang nor O'Brien need to worry so much. "No, that's why I need you to immediately take action to solve the problem in Africa, and simultaneously carry out the task of arresting Irwin and the task of communicating with surrounding forces." "Yes." O'Brien nodded, "Please, Guan and Luo Guang." Looking at the disconnected commander, the BSAA African minister complained, "Luo Guang, what you did was not kind, right?" Commander Law came in and didn't even say a word. The situation changed, and his decision at the beginning was wrong. Judging from the commander's attitude towards Luo Guang, it was better not to offend him rashly, so he changed his tone when talking to him. Luo Guang shook his head and said, "I'm not targeting you. This matter itself needs to be reported to the superiors. If the matter is urgent, tell O'Brien as well, so as not to waste time by talking again." Seeing that the other person's expression didn't seem to be really aimed at him, Ma Go-wan sighed and admitted defeat. "Then let's follow the commander's order. Are you with the other teams now? You elites will be responsible for Irwin's capture. I will do the communication. I will also use the remaining branch troops. We will immediately arrange for them to blockade the Jizuzu area. By the way, don't tell those forces about Plaka's ability to control the parasite. I don't want anyone to take advantage of it." Luo Guang added an important point. Guan nodded solemnly. Biochemical weapons themselves are also very attractive to those forces. "Meow, the current proofreading software will expire tomorrow, let's see if there is no other better use. Now every time I copy and paste this, there are a bunch of spaces, which is really annoying." Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 460. The closest BSAA base to the Kizuzu area. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. 8 BSAA combat teams have gathered in the hangar. They are preparing weapons and equipment while also receiving combat briefings. The general direction is designated by Minister Ma Go-wan, and the specific execution plan is responsible for Alpha Team Captain Dan DeCanti. Because taking into account the existence of GIMZ, they will divide their forces into two groups, one will be airborne by helicopter, and the other will be ground advancement. The BSAA combat team will directly take helicopters to parachute from both sides to attack the ore processing plant where Irwin is located. Luo Guang, Hank, Shiva, and Jessica took the land route to the factory, collecting crisis situations in the area along the way so that Ma Go-wan could persuade other forces to put aside their conflicts, and at the same time collect good intelligence for the subsequent extermination mission. Of course, Shiva and Jessica also shoulder the task of supervising the work of the GIMZ unit. Originally, Ma Go-wan planned for 3 of the elites to follow Luo Guang, but Luo Guang was not optimistic about the success of the arrest, so he rejected the suggestion with a look of resentment on Jessica's face. The mission begins and everyone sets off. On the Humvee, Luo Guang said to Jessica, who still looked dissatisfied, "Catch the thief first, capture the king first, it will be easier to solve this disaster after taking down Erwin, and we need more information to confirm the real plan of the mastermind behind the scenes. So I don't want to distract Captain DeCanty and his team. The difference between parasitic zombies without command and ordinary zombies is very small. It is easy for humans to command legions to bulldoze this rabble. As for arresting Erwin, Luo Guang felt that it would only turn into a mission to kill Erwin, so the more combatants the better. However, Shiva heard other meanings from the other party's words and asked, "Are you worried that the combat team's arrest operation will fail?" Just in case, Luo Guang made preparations in advance because he had memories of the game before time travel. Jessica suddenly asked, "Do you still have a lot of people in your GIMZ unit? I remember there are many famous combat teams. Do you plan to ask them to come over to help?" The anti-biochemical warfare over the years has earned each elite team a lot of fame and even a fan base. They won't come, but I called for other backup, so don't worry. Another reason why Luo Guang didn't call the GIMZ elite team for support was that he was worried that Wesker would attack the base again after knowing that those elite teams had left. But not calling the GIMZ elite team for support does not mean that Luo Guang didn't call for other reinforcements. Compared with the parasitic zombies he saw in the Illuminati cult, the combat effectiveness of Makanai here is slightly weaker, so Hank can easily deal with them. In fact, he and Hank could complete the task of arresting Erwin, but it would not be so easy for them to completely clean up the parasites here, otherwise Luo Guang would not let the troops who had just completed training participate in this battle. Jessica just hoped that there would be enough support and said, "Okay." They soon arrived near the blockade in the Kazuzu area. Just as the announcement said, the soldiers of the Provisional Z government ignored Luo Guang and others who came in a Humvee and did not fire any shots or cannons. They also seemed to be infected. Luo Guang expressed his opinion while holding the heavy machine gun in the car. In fact, he had confirmed it remotely using electromagnetic waves, but this ability could not be revealed. The driver was Hank. He didn't look back and said, because his expression is dull. "It's true that you were pointed at by a heavy machine gun, but these people are obviously not elite soldiers, but they are not afraid at all." Luo Guang found that the expressions of those guys with Plaka parasites in their bodies became monotonous, and they were either mentally retarded or crazy. Sample. But there are a few exceptions, such as Leonard they met. Because of this, Luo Guang did not doubt the other party when they first met. It was not until he discovered something suspicious in the store that he thought of confirming it. Why are there these differences despite all being type 3? It's because the Plaka parasite in Leonard's body is an improved type 3. It's the same type as the one in Sanlian's investigation team, so it's more concealed and the host behaves more naturally. The problem is that it is very difficult to mass-produce this improved type 3, and Erwin doesn't have many of them, so he only uses it on Leonard who needs it. Therefore, when Shiva said that she wanted to act together with Leonard, he asked Leonard to refuse the other party, just to prevent an accident that would lead to the death of this precious Plaka parasite. Shiva and Jessica nodded and took note of this feature. Of course, they knew there were exceptions, but it was enough to judge most people. By the way, what do you think about collecting evidence? We can't disembowel everyone in the Jizuzu area, right? Jessica asked them the key to this mission. Luo Guang moved the heavy machine gun aimed at the back of the car to the front and asked, "Do you have any ideas?" Jessica held her chin up, looked out the window, and replied, "There is no way, unless like that small town, all the townspeople come to look for trouble." She really didn't want to get into danger again, but after contacting her superiors, they offered her a price she couldn't refuse. For the sake of money and life, she decided to continue hugging Luo Guang's thigh. Luo Guang said, "The Plaka parasite has another characteristic. Although they are all mutants now, I observed it during the previous battle. There are no women or children among the enemies." The one thing he didn't say was that he had made 2 preparations, allowing the Red Emperor to crop the P picture and edit the previous battle video of the town as if it were this place. Jessica's eyes widened. She really didn't pay special attention to this, and in her opinion, it was normal for there to be many men on the battlefield. He was about to reply when he suddenly heard Luo Guang shout. "There's a town on the horizon, get ready." Shiva clutched the assault rifle in her hand, and as a miner, she felt a little nervous about the next task. When she was in the small town, things took a turn for the worse, and she encountered many dangers along the way. Without Hank's occasional help, she would have died there long ago. However, Shiva did not back down because of this. Although she was young, she had experienced a lot, so she quickly adjusted her mentality, relaxed her clenched hands, and entered a fighting state. Bang 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 bang. Applause rang from his ears, and Wesker turned to look at Axela with eyes full of love. "Lord Wesker, congratulations on your further improvement in strength. The potential of the mighty parasite seems to be endless." Axela came here to report the latest intelligence compiled to Wesker. But at that time, Wesker was fighting 10 tyrants and quickly defeated the enemies, so she had the previous sight. "The endless potential is not due to parasites, but to my research day and night." The arrogance that had just emerged was suppressed by GIMZ, allowing Wesker to still maintain his research enthusiasm. "And I used to think that tyrant was very powerful, but as he gets stronger and stronger, I feel more and more that the tyrant series is not as powerful as I thought before. What he can do now, his mortal enemy can also do, and unknowingly he has raised Luo Guang's image and strength." Before Axela could apologize, he asked, "What's going on over there at GIMZ now?" There is still a thorn in his heart, waiting for the opportunity to pull it out. Axela memorized all the information in his brain and replied directly. One of the team members named Hank left the base and went to the BSAA African branch to meet with Luo Guang, the consultant of the BSAA European branch. She added, "But that Luo Guang now seems to be participating in B.S.A.A.'s mission as a consultant to GIMZ. Luo Guang." Wesker muttered the name of his mortal enemy and asked, "Where have they gone?" "Trouble Irwin." "That's good, let that guy play with Luo Guang." "Are we going to abandon him?" "I think he is still valuable for our plan." Although Axela knew that Irwin called her his future wife, she believed that Irwin would help Wesker. "It was a big plan, so I endured it. It's not that we want to abandon him, but he only has so much use value. As long as Luo Guang is here, that guy can't escape." Although there is no evidence that Luo Guang can track Irwin's location, Wesker believes in Luo Guang's ability. "Is that person really that strong?" "Stronger than you think." "Woman," Wesker felt angry because by questioning Luo Guang, he was questioning himself after being defeated many times. Axela was startled and said quickly, "I'm sorry, Lord Wesker." Then she quickly shared the other party's worries and said, "In that case, why don't we capture the other party's girlfriend, the person named Jill, and then use the Plaka parasite to control her and kill each other with your mortal enemy?" She added, "It just so happens that our actions in Europe include the other party." Axela discovered the relationship between the two from the investigation and immediately thought of a poisonous plan. Not a bad idea. Wesker thought about it for a while. He didn't think that his mortal enemy would lose, and naturally it wouldn't affect his decisive battle with Luo Guang. "I agree, but I'll wait until the plan officially starts before executing the plan simultaneously. Don't let the small lose the big." The short bursts of heavy machine guns and the roar of engines were also mixed with the sounds of gunfire of various types. With a whoosh, the rockets flew towards the Humvee speeding through the wilderness. Hank did not panic. His eyes caught the rocket warhead flying at a speed of 295 meters per second. He turned the steering wheel and easily avoided the attack. Jessica deliberately gave the co-pilot position to Shiva because the co-pilot had the highest casualty rate. But she looked at the bulletproof glass in the front row and was shot several times from time to time, which still frightened her. It is true that the bullets fired will most likely not hit them, but if they hit Hank and cause the car to overturn, they will be doomed in this wilderness. On the contrary, Luo Guang was not afraid. When the bullet hit the shield of the heavy machine gun, he did not shrink back. He just stood and controlled the heavy machine gun to fight back. If you don't fight back, you are really seeking death. With Hank's snakeskin movement and Luo Guang's precise shooting, they entered the town, but even at this time, Jessica and Shiva did not lower their car windows to join the attack. Luo Guang and others drove around this small town, but they still couldn't find a stop or go to the next place. Jessica shouted, "Where are we going now? It looks like the whole town has been parasitized. I have taken pictures of the situation here, it's time for us to go back and do business." Not only those with guns, but those without guns would also pick up mud or stones on the ground and throw them at them. Hank felt the pressure many times higher than before, as if the whole town was rejecting them. Unlike the previous town, this is Erwin's base camp after all. According to Excella's plan, he will go all out to focus the attention of all the anti-biochemical forces on the African continent on himself and buy time for Excella, who is also in Africa. And as long as the plan is launched, the anti-biochemical organizations that besiege him will have no time to take care of themselves, and he will naturally survive to face the new world. So now Erwin no longer needs to deliberately spare Luo Guang and the others' lives? Hank didn't reply. He was concentrating on driving, trying to avoid those impervious Maginus. If he couldn't avoid them, he would find a good angle to minimize the damage to the car. Luo Guang was also using a heavy machine gun to cooperate with Hank's actions to clear obstacles, so he had no time to answer the other party. Shiva looked at Jessica behind her through the rearview mirror and said, "Have you forgotten? There are also parasitic enemies at the blockade, and they are more powerfully armed. We can only continue to move forward, and the things photographed must be kept first upload to the minister." Luo Guang and Hank saw the high-level and high-level dual-purpose anti-aircraft guns set up on the enemy's blockade line, and had no intention of dealing with these enemies easily. They had to leave it to those who came after them. Jessica said anxiously, "But there is nothing we can do if we go around in circles." With a click, the muzzle flash of the M2 heavy machine gun stopped. "Do you have any more ammunition?" Luo Guang retracted and looked at Jessica. Yes, Jessica reached out and touched it. It was empty. She turned around and saw that all 6,000 rounds of ammunition were gone. Luo Guang saw that the opponent's movements suddenly stopped and he knew that he was out of bullets, and said, "So don't even think about killing him back. No matter how fast the car is, it is difficult to dodge bullets, and the Humvee is not an armored vehicle. His counterattack is the main reason why they are safe now." Suddenly Hank turned the steering wheel, stepped on the accelerator, and shouted, "RPG!" Sure enough, without the heavy machine gun's counterattack, the enemy's rocket launcher soldiers had no counterattack and immediately launched a highly threatening counterattack. Previously, Luo Guang used electromagnetic induction to kill the hidden rocket soldiers through the wall. Otherwise, in this street battle, the tank would not be able to withstand it, let alone this small Humvee. The enemies came from behind, left and right, and these rockets left them nowhere to hide. Hank's choice to stop was his instinctive choice. One rocket fired from a high position directly disabled the front engine of the car, while other rockets knocked down his teammates. The rocket that hit was an armor-piercing projectile. The metal jet destroyed the engine and then shot into the ground. It did not cause any harm to the people in the car. In order not to get off the car on the main road, Hank used the last inertia to crash the car into a house and shouted, "Get off the car quickly." Without his reminder, the others opened the door and got out of the car before it stopped, and none of them seemed to be injured. "Damn it, I must apply for a salary increase when I go back." Jessica did not refer to BSAA, but to her other job. "Let's go." Luo Guang took out his pad machine, took a look at it, and immediately directed everyone to follow him. "Where are we going?" Shiva asked. "There are not many enemies in this town," Don't worry. Luo Guang finished speaking to Jessica, then answered Shiva's question and said, let's go directly to Irwin to cause trouble. Jessica said dissatisfied, as for the attack just now, you still said that there are not many enemies. Hank, who was at the end of the team, used the light machine gun in his hand to knock down the enemies who were coming in, and said, the density of bullets is much lower. Luo Guang's 6,000 rounds of heavy machine gun bullets were not wasted. Because the car is moving anytime and anywhere, and so are the enemies, Luo Guang's hit rate with his heavy machine gun is only about 90%. However, there are less than 20,000 people in this town. After excluding children and women, there are only about 1/3. After deducting those killed by Luo Guang, there are only 1 or 2,000 left. This quantity is not a problem for Luo Guang and Hank, because they are no longer holding the shotguns before, but light machine guns. Luo Guang opened the way in front, so all the enemies that appeared were hit by his internal parasites before attacking. It was like cheating, killing as many as they came. Jessica and Shiva were responsible for the enemies on the left and right. As they continued to advance, they also believed Luo Guang's words that there were not many enemies. But compared with before, the rate of enemies here with guns is much higher. However, as the main combat force, the gun-wielding Makanai are basically exhausted, leaving only a few lucky ones. But that doesn't mean that Shiva and I can relax our vigilance. They still keep their nerves tight and pay attention to enemies who suddenly appear with guns. Woof woof. Meow. I suddenly realized that I forgot to write about Xiao Bai in the previous chapter.